Good morning. I'd like to call to order the open meeting for Thursday, May 22nd, 2025, and ask the Commission Secretary for information on today's agenda.
Each commissioner has independently reviewed the minutes of the open meeting of Thursday, May 15th, 2025, and each has informed me there is no need to discuss the minutes.
I move we approve the minutes of the open meeting of Thursday, May 15, 2025.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Each commissioner has independently reviewed the agenda, and each has informed me there is no need to discuss the notices associated with agenda items 2 through 13. The suggested minute associated with agenda item 14, partially funding the request for intervenor compensation of BPSADC in the amount of $89,884 for its participation in docket 3270 UR 126, or the suggested minute associated with agenda item 15, partially funding the request for intervenor compensation of BPSADC in the amount of $86,284 for its participation in docket 6680 UR 125.
I move we approve the notices of investigation associated with agenda items 2 through 7.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I move we approve the notice of proceeding and rescission associated with agenda item 8.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. I move we approve the notices of proceeding associated with agenda items 9 through 13.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. In docket 1IC 571, I move we fund Blacks for Political and Social Action of Dane County its IC request in the amount of $89,884.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. And in docket 1IC 572, I move we fund Blacks for Political and Social Action of Dane County an IC request in the amount of $89,284.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so we are now going to move to our first discussion item of the day, which is agenda item 16, docket 5 LLG 2025, the Universal Service Fund Lifeline Grant Awards. Wisconsin's USF program was created to promote and assist with the availability and affordability of telecommunications services. Telecommunications companies are required to contribute to the USF, and the Commission administers several programs with those funds, including the Lifeline program. The Wisconsin Lifeline program provides a discount in addition to the federal discount to eligible low-income households on essential telecommunications services through a network of eligible telecommunications carriers across the state. The Commission received 9 applications, 8 for Track 1 and 1 for Track 2, with a total funding request of $420,392.64. This is an increase in the number of applications and total requested funding compared to the previous funding cycles. I commend our team for doing the extra work to spread the word about this opportunity and garnering so many requests. A screening panel consisting of 5 reviewers, 2 Commission staff members, and 3 USF council members reviewed the applications. After the applications were independently evaluated, the panel made funding recommendations to the Commission, which are laid out in our memo. The screening panel offered 2 viable options for us to consider, which are presented in alternatives 1 and 2 of the memo. Ultimately, I decided alternative 2 was my preferred option because it strikes a balance between awarding funding based on merit while supporting a larger number of projects in more areas across the state. The review panel indicates that the partial awards contained in alternative 2 will still provide sufficient funding to allow applicants to achieve their full project scope. I will now turn it over to my colleagues to hear where they are on this one, and I'm looking forward to our discussion. Commissioner Nieto?
Thanks, Chair Strand. Just in terms of initial remarks, echoing what you said, I think staff did a great job of doing outreach and bringing in more increase, and this is a highly subscribed grant program at this time compared to the amount available. And it was nice to see an application under Track 2 for the research and resource track, which was great as well. I'll join you at alternative 2. I do think we're still in the very highest of the merit scores and supporting a larger number of projects impacting a wider range of areas in the state. Thanks.
Thank you. Commissioner Hawkins?
Thank you. Yeah, I agree with both of my colleagues. This is consistent with my decisions in prior similar grant awards where spreading around the the grants to the broadest reach possible makes sense to me, and these were clearly the top of the 9 that were received. So I am at all 2 as well.
Perfect. I think we're all in agreement then. So we're ready for a motion.
All right, in docket 5 LLG 2025, I move we award the Universal Service Fund Lifeline grants consistent with our discussion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we are going to move on to our next discussion item and switch a couple things around. Just hold for 1 minute, please. Okay. Our first discussion item for today is docket 6630 CU 317, which is Wisconsin Electric Power Company's application seeking a certificate of public convenience and necessity for authority to install and place in service one new natural gas-fired electric generating facility at an existing coal electric generating facility site in Oak Creek, a city in southeastern Wisconsin. Most of my opening remarks in this docket also do apply to the next item before us today, which is 6630 CE 316, Webco's application for a CPCN to construct, own, and operate the Paris Reciprocating Internal Combustion Engine, or RICE, project in Kenosha County. There are differences that we'll discuss when we get to that item, but the general concepts have a lot of similarities and parallels. We're just going to pause for 1 second. Thank you. Okay. Transparency and providing opportunities for accessible public engagement are priorities for, transparency and providing opportunities for accessible public engagement are priorities of Governor Tony Evers' administration and the PSC. Today's open meeting gives interested members of the public in person and online the chance to hear our deliberations, reasoning, and decision-making. Due to the heightened attention these projects have received and the potential for audiences unfamiliar with the intricacies of our process, my opening remarks will include some general information about the Public Service Commission, the role of us commissioners, a regulatory framework that we work within, and other pertinent information. I will attempt to describe these things and discuss the project in clear language that is informative and readily understandable. Starting with a project overview. In the proposal before us, the new electric generating facility would include 5 combustion turbine generators, each generator having a nominal capacity of 220 megawatts, for a total capacity of approximately 1,100 megawatts. The proposed project is known as the Oak Creek CT project, or OCCT. The commission issued a notice of proceeding for the docket on August 15, 2024, and our administrative law judge granted a request for intervention to the following entities: Advanced Energy United, Citizens Utility Board, the City of Milwaukee, Clean Wisconsin, Healthy Climate Wisconsin, and the Union of Concerned Scientists, Renew Wisconsin, the Sierra Club, Walnut Way Conservation Corps, the Wisconsin Industrial Energy Group, the Wisconsin Local Government, and the Wisconsin Local Government Climate Coalition. Thank you to all the interveners in this proceeding. We appreciate your efforts and contributions to the record. This docket also received significant public participation, as evidenced by turnout at the public hearings and the 553 public comments filed through the PSC's webpage. We appreciate the public involvement in this proceeding because it helps build out the record of evidence for us to consider and provides insight and perspective that might not otherwise have been included. I would also like to extend a huge thank you to all the PSC staff for their hard work on these dockets. They were a very heavy lift and our staff did a great job. The proposed Oak Creek CT project is intended to assist the applicant in meeting obligations for significant new load expected to enter the applicant's service territory within the next few years. It also purports to provide significant reliability and resiliency benefits to all customers. According to the applicant, their need for the project is driven by increased demand due to substantial economic development and investment in southeastern Wisconsin, changing MISO reliability standards, the retirement of less efficient coal plants, and the increase in intermittent weather-dependent renewable generation resources. These factors all leave a gap in dispatchable, reliable Wisconsin-based generation resources for customers, and this project aims to address that gap. Combustion turbines are fully dispatchable resources, meaning they can provide energy at all hours for weeks on end and in any season. This is an important characteristic as these resources mitigate risk and complement renewable resources by ensuring energy is available when large amounts of intermittent resources are unavailable. As I mentioned, this proceeding began in 2024 when WEBCO filed their application for the project. Throughout the proceeding, PSC staff performed a variety of reviews and analyses, including environmental assessments, modeling, and legal work. They also issued numerous data requests seeking additional information from the applicant. Our various interveners submitted testimony and data requests, and the applicant responded to staff and intervener inquiries, while the public had several opportunities to weigh in at public hearings or via written comments. All of this information and work product became part of the record of evidence that's before the commission today. In preparation for our decision-making, the three of us independently reviewed and analyzed the information in the record, and today is the first time we're discussing it together. Next, I'm just going to talk a little bit about the role of the commission. Most of you here already know this, but for anyone else who doesn't, that's following along, and then I'll circle back to the decisions on the projects before us today. The PSC is unique and unlike most governmental bodies. It's a state agency, but it's also quasi-judicial, and our regulatory oversight and processes are bound by statutes and administrative rules. It's important to note that the three commissioners are not legislators. We cannot and do not craft state law or public policy because those powers are specifically conferred to the legislative branch of government. As commissioners, our job is to review applications filed by entities we regulate and issue decisions in furtherance of our mission to ensure the provision of safe, reliable, affordable, and environmentally responsible utility services and equitable access to telephone and broadband services. This requires critical thinking and balancing the varying interests presented to arrive at legally sound, just, and reasonable decisions that align with our mission and are in the public interest. We have to take up applications as they come in, and construction projects, like the ones before us today, have strict statutory deadlines to adhere to. If a statutory deadline is missed, an application is automatically approved. Therefore, it's important for us to meet those statutory deadlines so we have the opportunity to thoroughly review and potentially improve an application through the inclusion of project conditions that are in the public interest and within the regulatory and statutory framework we are bound by. It's important to state here that utilities make decisions on what projects to pursue and file the related applications with the commission seeking the appropriate mechanisms, instruments, and outcomes. The commission then reacts and responds to the filings. The commission does not dictate the type or location of the proposed generation or transmission facilities. When reviewing and considering environmental aspects, our regulatory framework prohibits us from determining that the design, location, or route of a facility is not in the public interest because of the impact of air pollution, so long as the proposed facility meets the requirements of Chapter 285, our state's air pollution statute. Okay, so that's all for background on the commission role, so I'm going to circle back to discussion of the decisions before us today. The record in this docket is vast and complex with very little area of agreement or compromise among the parties. The commission is charged with being open and objective decision makers. We do not prejudge, and we don't let our personal feelings influence decisions. We review the record, again, from an impartial position, weigh the evidence, and render decisions that comply in both with applicable statutes and rules. In both dockets before us today, we need to answer a number of questions derived from the statutes governing our process and the issuance of CPCNs for construction projects. These determinations include if the proposed project satisfies the reasonable needs of the public for an adequate supply of electric energy, if the proposed project is in the public interest, if there are any energy priority law or EPL options, cost-effective, technically feasible, and environmentally sound alternatives to building the proposed project, if the proposed project substantially impairs the efficiency of applicant service, provides facilities unreasonably in excess of probable future requirements, or adds to the cost of service without proportionally increasing the value of service, and whether or not the project will unreasonably interfere with the orderly land use and development plans for the area. We also consider undue adverse impacts on other environmental values. Here, the record demonstrates this project would be located on land currently owned by WEBCO adjacent to the existing Oak Creek Power Plant, which has been utilized for power generation activities since the 1950s and is classified as a brownfield site. The environmental review concludes commission staff have not identified any potential environmental effects of the proposed project that could be considered significant. The final environmental assessment further notes that based on the proposed emission limits and operating requirements in this application, in the permanent shutdown of the existing Oak Creek coal-fired units, this project would actually result in significant permanent reductions to emissions from the Oak Creek Power Plant. Regarding the many concerns expressed about the uncertainty of the prospective new load, given the confidential nature of the record, I cannot offer specifics, but I will say that I found the record demonstrated the applicant was responsive to the intervener's concerns about this uncertainty and demonstrated that customer protecting mechanisms were in fact in place. The record further demonstrates that demand in the applicant's service territory is expected to grow significantly in the near term. One large data center campus is being built in nearby Mount Pleasant, and others may soon follow. It also demonstrates that the Oak Creek project was selected as the least cost alternative in the vast majority of modeling runs. A quick note on modeling. Those familiar with the PSC's acquisition or construction review process are aware that modeling is an important tool used to build portions of the record of evidence that the Commission analyzes and considers when making its determinations. Modeling is a technical and analytical process that tests the viability of a project. In this dynamic environment, modeling is amazingly complex and involves numerous elements, considerations, and sometimes forced constraints, including EPA greenhouse gas rules, load demands, seasonal accreditation, direct loss of load construct, and other aspects. This docket's modeling also included planning futures that assumed different input assumptions for variables including demand and energy growth, natural gas pricing, inflation rates, carbon dioxide penalty costs, and renewable tax credits. The applicant provided a number of sensitivities reviewing various variables such as accreditation of solar resource capacity, accreditation of BESS capacity, and changes to project capital costs. The applicant maintains that with a significant near-term capacity and energy need, the Oak Creek project provides considerable quantitative and qualitative benefits to its customers in the vast majority of the scenarios modeled and sensitivities analyzed in this proceeding. Commission staff, partially tasked with a trust but verify approach, analyzed the applicant's modeling and confirmed the proposed project does continue to be routinely selected as part of the applicant's optimal generation portfolio, even when modifications were made to the model to address some intervener concerns and other considerations raised. To me, the record clearly demonstrates that robust modeling analysis was undertaken by the applicant, staff, and some interveners. Through the course of the proceeding, planning assumptions and variables were tested, modified, and retested, heavily scrutinized by the parties, and heavily defended by the applicant. If anyone is interested in reading various critiques of utility modeling and then critiques of those critiques, several more rounds of critiques, needs to look no further than this docket and the next item on our agenda today. As with any modeled economic analysis, the conclusions depend on the range of inputs chosen and the quality of the information underlying those inputs. In this proceeding, a lot of testimony was focused on the fact that much of the record was dominated by and focused on modeling scenarios and sensitivities. Yet, at a foundational level, we must keep in mind that our utilities have a duty to serve its customers' energy needs and therefore must have access to sufficient resources to do so. Again, the record does demonstrate that WEBCO's load is projected to increase significantly in the near term, largely as a result of the I-94 corridor load. The record also demonstrates how the unique characteristics of the proposed project meet the applicant's needs and obligations. For example, evidence in the record shows that the project provides flexibility and is designed to quickly meet demand. At the same time, while not necessarily the intent, if needed, the proposed project could produce energy 24 hours per day for long durations, unlike renewables and BESS. That's not to say this commission is anti-renewable. Quite the opposite, in fact. Since 2019, the PSC has approved 5,746 megawatts of solar construction and 1,643 megawatts of BESS projects. However, the record, and not our personal preferences, is what must drive our decision-making on these projects before us. The evidence in this proceeding sufficiently showed that project alternatives such as solar, BESS, wind, and increases in energy conservation are not technically feasible nor cost-effective options compared to the proposed project and under these specific circumstances. Further, the record included evidence showing that replacing even a portion of the OCCT project with renewable generation or BESS may cost several times more than what's proposed. While batteries can help shift stored energy to different points on a given day, the record did illustrate their limitations with respect to duration, charging, and discharging capabilities. Energy conservation initiatives through increased energy efficiency and demand response programs were also mentioned and offered as alternatives. Due to existing statutory constraints and the voluntary nature of these programs, we can and do encourage participation and expansion, but we cannot mandate it. For example, in WEBCO's last rate case, the Commission approved a Bring Your Own Device demand response pilot program and increased the program participation limit from the 7,000 devices originally proposed up to 64,000 devices. We are eager to learn from this pilot and hope that it will help set the stage for new WEBCO-based demand response programs. In summary, the findings in the record help shape my decision-making on the important issues before us. Next, I'm going to talk a little bit about conditions. The record, as laid out in the decision matrix, presents a series of conditions to consider imposing. Some conditions are standard conditions this commission routinely includes in previously approved projects. Some are new conditions brought forward by staff, and others are proposed by interveners. There are conditions related to environmental impacts, construction, and reporting requirements. We'll get to all of these proposed conditions as we work through the decision matrix, but I would like to address one primary issue that garnered several proposed conditions and much discussion in the record: cost overruns. The commission has grappled with this issue for a couple years. In Webco's most recent rate case, I discussed this issue at length and noted that it's very difficult to address cost overrun issues on the back end and within the confines of a rate case where there are hundreds of contested issues presented. I stated that we needed greater study and scrutiny of cost overrun issues before and during projects. While the record in this case includes a number of cost overrun-related conditions the commission could consider imposing as part of its decision today, this approach is not sufficient to thoroughly and holistically address the issue across the board and provide the commission with the tools and information needed to develop a framework and methodology for dealing with cost overruns. Establishing a cost overrun framework requires a deliberative and comprehensive approach. We need to gather information, convene various stakeholders, discuss and analyze components, share ideas, and develop workable strategies and solutions. Therefore, I am going to propose that the commission open an investigation on the cost overrun topic. I acknowledge that some of our investigative dockets have taken a while to work their way through our process, especially when the original scope and focus of the investigation doesn't keep pace with the rapidly changing energy industry. But let me be abundantly clear. I am not proposing this for the heck of it. If approved, this investigation will be a priority for commission staff, and we'll get moving on it as soon as possible. I expect genuine and substantive engagement from stakeholders on this investigation. While I apologize for springing this on my colleagues in real time and do not expect them to weigh in on it right away in their opening comments, instead, after issue 8, before we take up the proposed conditions that start in issue 9, I'll provide additional detail about the cost overrun investigation and gather their thoughts then. Moving on, I hate to put on my disappointed mom hat, but I do have some missed opportunities in the record that need to be addressed. Unfortunately, these are common themes and issues and players, so until we start seeing improvement, I'm going to keep talking about these things. The first missed opportunity is what I call the 3 C's: collaboration, compromise, and community engagement. Applicants cannot keep going through the motions with the business-as-usual approach that this is how we've always done it. The industry has undergone extensive transformation and is continuing to evolve rapidly. Times like these require thoughtful and unique approaches, including stakeholder engagement in the communities served. This is not rocket science. Recent proceedings provide instances of applicants exerting significant good faith efforts to proactively communicate, engage with local partners and stakeholders, build trust, and provide value and resources to the community. The Vista Sands docket, where this commission approved 1,315 megawatts of solar electric generation and 330 megawatts of battery energy storage system, is an awesome example of how collaboration, compromise, and community engagement should occur. The Vista Sands record clearly demonstrated that the applicant undertook and led a thorough and robust community engagement process. Through its proactive and transparent communication and outreach, the applicant created project awareness, helped educate, built relationships and trust, and identified points of negotiation and compromise that ultimately resulted in a viable, mutually beneficial project that has the potential to deliver extraordinary value that may not otherwise exist in that region of the state. The Vista Sands record was filled with examples of negotiation and compromise and exemplifies the approach we consistently seek and encourage in all construction projects. In the docket before us, there was a great deal of back and forth between the applicant, staff, and interveners in the record, and hundreds of public comments were submitted. Yet there was very little evidence that negotiation and compromise were attempted, let alone established. Obviously, the various parties represented advocate for unique and different constituencies, often at opposite ends of the spectrum and with different perspectives on these issues. So I understand that it's challenging to find areas of compromise, but it's not impossible. Unfortunately, this record does not indicate much work was done to collaborate or find compromise much of anything, and to me, it's a missed opportunity. Our next missed opportunity is more of a misdirected opportunity, and this is regarding legislative changes, also something that we have to talk about a lot. Proposed project alternatives and conditions outside of our existing statutory and regulatory framework and the rule of law, some of which we have in this docket, are not legally viable. Even if we as individuals are supportive and want to incorporate them, They are still aspirational red herrings that serve to distract, misrepresent, and create false hope and expectations. As a quasi-judicial body, our actions are bound by laws and frequently challenged in court. We cannot approve things that are legally unviable and harm the integrity and credibility of the commission. This docket frequently brought up 3 issues that require legislative change rather than commission approval. Integrated resource planning is the first one, focus on energy, increased contributions is the second, and the energy priorities law is the third. Digging into this record, it was again obvious to me that the modeling implicitly relied on in aspects of the applicant's integrated resource plans, Yet, under our state law, we cannot require regulated entities to submit IRPs. In their absence, we're tasked with making important decisions like this one in a vacuum without the full picture in front of us. Regulators, customers, and the public should have access to this information. Governor Evers has included robust IRP provisions in his last 2 proposed budgets, but they haven't survived the legislative process. Rather than ask us to supersede our authority or suggest that we require these, I would suggest advocating for that provision and other portions of the PSC budget during the budget process that's going on right now. Increased energy efficiency is another issue that arises in this docket. State statute section 196.374 sub 3 sub B requires investor-owned electric and natural gas utilities to contribute 1.2% of their annual operating revenues to energy efficiency and specifically the Focus on Energy program. While we can encourage increased energy efficiency efforts and participation, and do, we cannot mandate utilities exceed the statutory limits in place. This would require statutory change to adjust. Focus on energy contributions. Since 2019, Governor Evers' budget proposals have included a provision increasing the utilities' energy efficiency contribution. Unfortunately, these also did not survive any budget processes. His 2025-27 state budget proposes increases to the contribution, doubling it to 2.4%. Again, something that could be advocated for right now. Third, the energy priorities law. A third example is that we are bound by the existing energy priorities law and the types of generation that it currently includes. We can't unilaterally include or consider different types of generation not listed in the EPL. We cannot change the priority order of the EPL, and we need to be mindful of plain language, legislative intent, and precedent when analyzing projects within the EPL confines and CPCN framework. The EPL was enacted in 1993 and updated in 2005. The Wisconsin Renewable Portfolio Standard, enacted in 2005 as an update to the EPL, was phased in through 2015 and has not been updated since. If the current language of the EPL is obsolete and does not reflect our modern dynamic industry and innovation, perhaps legislative advocacy for statutory change could provide a path forward. I don't raise these examples to discourage substantive, relevant, passionate advocacy, but instead to redirect it to the venue and vehicle for change. I read the public comments and watch the hearing, and in this record, we saw participation from doctors, parents, farmers, nurses, elected officials, neighborhood leaders, retired health professionals, engineers, professors, just to name a few, from all over the state. That's exactly the kind of broad grassroots coalition that might be able to get something done in the legislature on these important issues. With the stage now set, in consideration of the evidence in the record and our statutory framework, I do support the issuances of a CPCN for this project for the requested capacity of approximately 1,100 megawatts with conditions. Before we walk through the various decision points, I will turn it over to my colleagues to provide any opening comments they have, and look forward to hearing from you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairperson Strand. I think your opening remarks did a good job describing the issue in this case, describing the project, the statutory requirements that we're under, the standards that we're looking at, and some of the more technical aspects of the modeling scenarios and sensitivities at that higher level, so I won't repeat any of those here. I'll make a few comments in addition to those that you've made. Wisconsin Electric is in the process of transitioning to clean energy. The utility is working toward a goal, as we saw discussed in the record, of reducing carbon emissions by 80% by 2030 and to get to net zero carbon emissions by the year 2050. It's doing this through its Generation Reshaping Plan, or GRP. The utility is retiring coal altogether by 2032 and retiring older inefficient gas plants as well. and replacing these with 4,300 megawatts of clean energy. The commission has approved construction or acquisition of solar, wind, and battery resources for Wisconsin Electric, and there are currently more solar, wind, and battery resources in queue and pending dockets that are publicly before us as well for the applicant. And according to this record, more of those resources on the way beyond that. Energy efficiency and demand response are in the mix too, to a degree, which I'd like to discuss further as well. I'll say, just as an initial, Chair Strand, you mentioned a few conditions, including the opening of a generic docket to look into cost overruns. And I know you'll give a little bit more detail on that, but that's something that I kept thinking about and coming across as I reviewed this record as well. And I just to preview for you that that's something that I would look forward to supporting, as well as some of the other condition items that you're previewing here. I will say that I will have a condition to propose related to demand response and not related to energy efficiency. As you said, we do have very clear statutory language around the utilities' participation in the Focus on Energy program, and we wouldn't order energy efficiency activities in any way above and beyond that per the law. Within the context of this transition under the Generation Reshaping Plan, now you have significant data center development coming into the state, and for this utility at this time, adding a need for approximately 1,800 megawatts more of capacity. This is producing some new challenges and unique circumstances that are being addressed in this docket, and some aspects of those challenges will be addressed in future dockets as well. The applicant is asking to fill 1,228 megawatts of that incremental demand with the Oak Creek CT units and the Paris Rice units. And it's asking to do this as part of a broader generation portfolio, as I've noted. So if a project meets the statutory criteria, as Chairperson Strand said, and the public interest is served, we do have a statutory obligation to approve it. And I found that this project, subject to certain conditions that we'll get into later, at the end of the day, does meet those criteria. I did mention a demand response condition, and I had a second condition related to customer protections. So because this isn't a standard CPCN, and this is one customer's predominantly need, we haven't seen a single customer drive a project this big before, and we do need, in my mind, certain project-specific conditions to protect other ratepayers and the utility. With that, I'll say I also appreciate the many members of the public who took the time to provide comment in writing and at the public hearings. I took to heart all of the comments, many in opposition and many in support. Your comments did lead me to look at several aspects of this case from different and various perspectives. I also appreciate the interveners and their expert testimony and efforts to find innovative solutions and to provide us with additional solid options for our discussion here. And I found that incredibly helpful on a number of issues. And appreciate the commission staff as well, who combed through the data and testimony to help me and my colleagues put this project into perspective, and appreciate the applicant bringing forward this application, which reflects their attempts to meet the needs of their customers under a unique set of circumstances. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Yuto. Commissioner Hawkins?
Thanks. Yeah, I want to echo a lot of what my colleagues have said here, and thank the chair for a good job describing the project, the process overall, and frankly, this job that I have. That's always helpful to hear that as a reminder. You did introduce a new 3 Cs for me to keep track of, though. The chair of the NERC board also has 3 Cs, and they're different. And now I'm going to have to write these down. I want to start off by thanking the participants and those that came out to provide public comments, both at the public hearings and in written format. Observing the public hearing and reading through the comments over the past few weeks has given me a really deep understanding of the many strong perspectives on this project. I want to give a special thanks to our ALJ Judge Newmark, who once again expertly managed these very robust proceedings with confidence and calm. It brought a smile to my face every time I read the transcript and had him, I could see him forcing the experts to introduce themselves to each other before diving into cross-examination. And I really appreciated seeing that every time, very frequently throughout the hearing transcripts. Excuse me. It's not every day that I get to put my fancy engineering degrees to use, but generation projects like this one certainly have afforded a really big opportunity to play engineer for about a month. And I've certainly used that opportunity and dug into the many technical fronts and modeling assumptions and generator specs that the chair was laying out were involved as a very robust part of this application process. And I want to echo the thanks that Commissioner Nieto just had to the interveners and the technical experts that provided their insights and challenged the views and assumptions of the applicant. I thought that really did further develop the record in a useful way that shaped my thinking and also I think helped staff in their data requests and additional support for building the record. As an application comes before me, I just start from a place of skepticism, and then I love seeing all that evidence pile up. And as I dig through it and my thinking evolves, I know I sympathize with for Michaela, who has to watch my thoughts change as I read through piles of evidence. So just a bit of insight there. To lay out just sort of my big picture perspectives on how I was thinking about this application, for me, reliability is number one. If the lights go out, the ability to bring on additional clean energy is stopped cold in its tracks. And my colleagues have mentioned the vast amount of clean energy that this commission has approved and has pending before us. And so I keep reliability front and center. The applicant did a really thoughtful analysis of showing how these resources support that reliability and also support the larger investments in new advanced technologies while recognizing their current limitations. The Commission's job is to protect ratepayers, and one way we do that is through ensuring that utilities are planning for a reliable system. We also do that through ensuring environmental regulations are followed and appropriate conditions are put in place. The chair laid out the limitations of this agency as it relates to those environmental regulations, and the appropriate place for any modifications to those is not the commission. And if it turns out that a utility is gambling with ratepayer dollars, and if those costs end up stranded, the commission can certainly review the recoverability of those costs. Excess generation can be sold to other utilities that need it, or something else that we haven't even thought of. And those are things that are discussed in rate case proceedings and not in CPCN proceedings. So there's a lot of ways and tools that the commission has to protect ratepayers. This particular project has some solid protections in place that were already mentioned. And we have options if circumstances change, as I was just discussing. The idea that was brought up multiple times of not acting on these projects, in my mind, only does two things. It increases the risks to reliability, and it limits the amount of growth that can happen in the state to zero or near zero. Echoing what Commissioner Nieto just said, the degree of certainty of the anticipated load was really a central focus in this case, and rightfully so. I promise that this certainty was reviewed inside and out. I trust my colleagues, I know myself, and the staff was certainly all over this topic. I've spent a great deal of time reflecting on what the reasonable needs of the public are, and that's one of the key standards we have to review. And for me, it really boiled down to that a couple things. The applicant is legally required to provide reliable service, and cannot connect new loads to its system at a speed that jeopardizes that reliability. It just can't do it. It's not legal. The uncertainty that was discussed is caused in part because of the physical realities of the generation and the load that the applicant has. There is just not an ability to serve load right now, additional load right now, and many were pointing to that as sort of a cause of the uncertainty. And so I see the suggestion of denying the project, as interveners suggested, would only serve to create a longer pause and additional uncertainty. And I lastly just want to acknowledge the urgency, and that was really a central theme throughout this proceeding. And there are just a couple of undeniable truths as it relates to urgency. The urgency is real and widespread. It's not only in this applicant's footprint, but it's all over the industry and all over the country. And in this context, some solutions are genuinely infeasible. The utility industry and its regulatory structure is not built for speed, but is adapting in a really admirable way, and I want to thank staff for taking on the tsunami of work associated with this historic shift. But that said, urgency cannot be an excuse and cannot be used in perpetuity. We have insights into expected future loads, and I expect the bar will be raised and options expanded for adequate consideration in subsequent applications. I certainly have thoughts on how analysis can be improved going forward, and I'll be working with staff to ensure my expectations for future cases are met. And I'm optimistic that not only some of my own ideas, but those provided by interveners can be incorporated into the Commission's ongoing RA investigation docket as well. That said, I'm looking forward to our discussion, and I will turn things back to you, Chairperson Strand.
Thank you both for your comments. They were wonderful, and I think provided some really good information and perspectives leading up to our discussion. So to quickly, just about our game plan for the projects on the agenda, we are going to use the decision matrix to guide our discussions and decisions. Friendly reminder that they are just that, a guide. They frame the issues and point us in the direction of the record, but they don't replace the record. They're not perfect, nor do they contain everything that every party wants in them, but they still function, so we're absolutely going to keep using them. There was a staggering amount of information in these cases, and so while my colleagues and I could not discuss these dockets with each other beforehand, I can assure you that we have all read, reviewed, analyzed, discussed, and dug deeply into the record and on every issue. Again, we'll use the decision matrix to guide and organize the decisions and do our best to be clear about what we're doing. So our first issue before us asks if the proposed project, if constructed, satisfies the reasonable needs of the public for an adequate supply of electric energy as required by statute 196.491, sub 3, sub D2. So here I'm at alternative 1, that yes, it does, if constructed, satisfy the reasonable needs. I covered a lot of this issue in my opening remarks, as did my fellow commissioners, but to summarize, this project underwent a very thorough review and significant analysis was undertaken. The record sufficiently demonstrates an expected capacity need, and the proposed project was routinely selected in the modeling analysis. So therefore, I'm at alternative 1 on this one. Commissioner Nito?
Thanks, Chair Strand. I am at alternative 1 for this issue as well. Again, I think a lot of our opening discussion covered this, but under this issue, we really need to figure out whether the size of the plant the utility is requesting to build is reasonable to meet the needs of the public for an adequate supply, and a lot of, we all put in a lot of thought about that reasonable needs. I think this is, again, a unique fact pattern because normally we're reviewing the size of new plants to see if they're reasonable and not overbuilt to meet normal load growth. And the reason the law doesn't allow for overbuilding is because that would lead to customers overpaying. And in this case, however, we have a very large customers coming onto the system. And so that reasonable need, to my mind, has a little bit of a higher bar to clear because there's significant cost attributable not to hundreds or thousands of customers increasing usage, but to a very large customer. And so you don't have that broader base over which forecasting errors can be smoothed out. I'll say I also reviewed the substantial modeling, testimony, exhibits, and comments on this issue, and did find substantial evidence that even at only 450 megawatts of new demand, the utility would still have a capacity and energy need in addition to the size of this project. With regard to those risks and uncertainties related to the magnitude of the large load customer demand, I'll reiterate what my colleagues have said. The applicant did file tariffs and associated service agreements for the commission to review in a separate docket related to some of these concerns that are being raised. And related particularly to this proceeding, there was testimony discussing those customer protections and assurances, and also some confidential information filed as well, as was raised. And that information was, there's information essentially showing that other customers should never bear the risk of subsidizing projects that do not benefit them. Reiterating what my colleagues have said, a utility's franchise responsibility includes an obligation to acquire resources for reasonably forecasted load before that load appears. And however, energy-intensive, very large customers and their level of demand present those unique challenges and risks. So in order to address some of the valid concerns raised about those risks, and to really supplement affirmations in the applicant testimony regarding risk, I found it necessary to order the following. In the event that the very large customer's load forecast significantly decreases, the applicant shall notify the commission within 30 days and take all appropriate customer protection measures detailed in applicant testimony and exhibits, or any approved future tariff. And that way, if portions of the forecast load do not materialize, we can understand timely how that interacts with the assurances provided in testimony and also in the confidential evidence in this proceeding. And we can additionally ensure other customers won't be asked to bear the risks of subsidizing projects they don't need. I am requesting to be notified specifically of a decrease in load in this case because it's directly relevant to our determination on this issue number one, and based on the specific facts of the case, this condition protects the public interest and provides added transparency on that protection. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Hawkins?
Thanks. On this one, I am also at alternative one. The proposed project, if constructed, will satisfy the reasonable needs of the public. My thinking here is that load is coming on in the near term, as has been discussed, and retirements are occurring in the nearer term. We've confirmed a gap in the available resources to serve that load through the extensive modeling that has been revised and exhibits that this gap is real and exists. We've also confirmed that this project is economic under a very conservative load scenario that is completely not speculative. You can see the construction and dirt moving today. WEPCO's customer is building, and there is nothing speculative about that. I therefore found it rather simple to identify that this project satisfies the reasonable needs of the public. I'll also note that new businesses are part of the public. The public isn't set in stone and isn't just who was here using electricity yesterday. The needs of the public is inclusive of growth and includes new and existing customers. Following along to what Commissioner Nieto just discussed, the applicant argued that the degree of load certainty that the interveners were requesting has never been required to approve an electric generation project in the past. And while that may be true, this is an unprecedented circumstance with unprecedented costs and risks with these load increases. And so it's completely reasonable that the commission consider appropriate steps to assess the reasonable needs of the public. There should definitely be higher levels of certainty with higher levels of risk to protect the interests of all of WEPCO's customers. There is an argument, or there's an agreement in place that does protect consumers, and that's a great first step. More are currently under development, as Commissioner Nieto just mentioned, are here at the commission. Those pieces really did help inform my position on what the reasonable needs of the public were. I'm interested in discussing the condition that Commissioner Nieto just raised, still thinking on that. But in general, what I identified was it's totally appropriate to have higher requirements for bigger dollars, bigger risks. That is just common sense. And so I was disagreeing with the fact that the applicant said that because we've never required certainty before, don't have to have that here. I think we've got some good first steps. I'm interested in additionals, and that's why I'm at Alt 1.
Thank you. Do you want to weigh in on the condition, or do you want to wait? I'll wait till you. Okay. I don't have much to say. I think, from my understanding from what you said, is that it's just a reporting requirement regarding load dropping, the size of the load decreasing significantly, and.
Yep.
Okay.
And
Yep.
following what's already been stated.
Yep. So I think because it's, a good faith, reasonable reporting requirement, I don't have any issues with including it in this.
Thank you.
Commissioner Hawkins?
Yeah, I'm supportive of it as well. I appreciate that approach as opposed to reading about it in a newspaper. And then also, I think there was sort of an action step that anything that's been committed to as far as those protections that I was just talking about kind of get triggered through that condition, and I think that makes total sense.
Okay. Thank you.
And just to clarify, Chairperson Strand, you're good with that additional step that Commissioner Hawkins was just referencing, the action step?
Sure.
Okay.
Okay, ready for us to move on? Okay. So issue 2 asks if the proposed project is in the public interest, considering alternative sources of supply, alternative locations, individual hardships, engineering, economic, safety, reliability, and environmental factors pursuant to Wisconsin Statute Section 186.491, sub 3, sub D3. So here again, I am at alternative 1, that the proposed project is in the public interest considering those factors. Again, the record does contain voluminous analysis of substantial modeling runs, nearly all of which demonstrated that this project is a cost-effective solution that will provide reliable and dispatchable energy at all times. So I felt that this statute was satisfied, and therefore I'm at alternative 1. Commissioner Nieto.
Thanks, Chair Strand. For the same reason that you just described, I'm at alternative 1 here. This is the issue under which my second and final suggested condition comes into play. This is regarding some of the discussion, ample discussion throughout the record on energy efficiency and demand response. Again, we have very specific statutory requirements around energy efficiency in our law that guide what we do there. Regarding demand response, several interveners provided evidence that there is significant untapped potential for demand response. I found these untapped resources clearly cannot replace the need for the project, but they could be leveraged in addition to the project. The applicant discussed its diverse generation portfolio and how that diverse portfolio, including renewables and storage, is bolstered by the addition of the natural gas units, and how that diverse mix interplays. And I think that's, under this issue for me, one of the supporting arguments also for the appropriateness of the unit is how they bolster and support the other resources in the applicant's mix. To the applicant's point there, there was discussion. I think the applicant indicated it's pretty hard to model demand response specifically for the purposes of a proceeding like this, because demand response is a program. And so you need to take time to understand what type of program you're talking about, what the scope is, develop that, and then model it in somehow. It's something that takes quite a while. So there was some generic demand response modeled in. And I think to a point Chair Strand made earlier in our discussion, in the utilities' previous rate case, it had proposed the Bring Your Own Device pilot. That pilot will become active January 1, 2026. So I think that is an exciting development, and the applicant points to that too. And because of some of this discussion of how the length of time that it takes for demand response programs to be developed, I would require the applicant in its next rate case to follow up by providing a plan to leverage other demand response opportunities in addition to the Bring Your Own Device. As part of within this diverse resource mix, a low capital cost solution within that mix. So my condition would be that the applicant shall submit in its next rate proceeding additional analysis of a robust and comprehensive demand response program capable of providing significant capacity, and leaving that open to the applicant to design and to respond to. I'll note several intervener witnesses provided examples of successful utility demand response approaches that are meeting what that type of plan would be. So there was quite a bit in the record there on that. With that, I'm at alternative 1, finding the proposed project is in the public interest considering these factors. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Hawkins?
Thanks. I am also at alternative 1, that the project is in the public interest. Considering the environmental factors, the commission, as was stated earlier, is not an air quality regulator and defers to the requirements put in place by the DNR. I appreciate that many commenters and interveners suggested, the economic harms associated with environmental factors, but those are considered as part of the DNR rulemaking process, and it goes outside of the boundaries of the authorities given to the commission, and is therefore not allowed under the law. The DNR, in conjunction with the commission, has evaluated those environmental impacts, including air and water impacts, and deemed that the project is permittable. And the issuance of the permit ensures that public health is protected in accordance with the relevant statutes. On the economic factors, the commission looks at the cost of electric service, not the cost of potential health impacts. As I said earlier, that falls under DNR's analysis. WEPCO looked, one thing that really spoke to me in the record on whether this project in particular was in the public interest was that the applicant locked in prices for these turbines quite a while ago and noted that prices are going up. So when interveners were discussing delay or less, potentially a smaller project, the applicant stated that the delay would lead to more expense as the need continues to rise. And I really agree with that. Combustion turbines are an extremely hot commodity, and the economics of supply and demand are playing out in the industry. And another key piece of the economic factors that I was analyzing in depth when determining if this project was in the public interest was, not surprisingly for a gas generator, the cost of gas. And there was a lot of work done by interveners and staff to confirm that the gas cost assumptions were reasonable. If you're trying to determine if this is an economic project, you need to make sure that the inputs that actually make the project work are modeled appropriately. And so this was a really big deal for me. The applicant was talking about needing firm gas and needing to have reliable capacity. And so making sure that all of the price inputs for that were modeled correctly was something I went over in great detail. And I am confident that it was done appropriately, and at the outset was even done rather conservatively. So I thought that was critical to see that level of analysis, and I appreciate the back and forth from interveners and the applicant on that one. The proposed location, reusing the existing interconnection site that customers have already paid for, is hugely in the public interest. Having that point of interconnection on the grid close to load go underutilized would just not make economic sense. And from an engineering and reliability perspective, the modeling showed that CTs were selected under a wide range of scenarios. And I'll just leave that there. And I agree there's always room for improvement in how alternative sources of supply are analyzed, and the responses by the applicant were helpful in supporting the reasonableness of their underlying assumptions, and some of those changed as we got additional rounds of analysis. So for all of those reasons, I was at alternative 1 here.
Thank you. Do you want to talk about the proposed condition now?
Sure. I'll talk about Commissioner Nieto's proposed condition. First of all, I'm still very excited about the Bring Your Own Device program, just as I was whenever that rate case was. And I was excited to see it brought up in the record. And I'll just say, in response to what Commissioner Nieto proposed, in competitive markets where you see an urgent capacity need, you see demand response as the first thing that's deployed because it's the fastest to deploy. So some of the discussion of time to get up to speed, while I recognize things, it's not like flipping a light switch and does require time, it is faster than buying and building a generator. So I would expect if the applicant was responding to urgent needs, which have been claimed and verified, there would be a rush to demand response to maintain reliability and affordability for its customers. So I am extremely excited to see the results of this Bring Your Own Device program, partly because the devices are probably already installed at the customer's homes and don't actually require anyone to do anything. So before I just keep spiraling on that program for a while, I would support, I guess, filing of analysis of additional programs. I think behavioral demand response programs were discussed in the record. That's something that is currently not utilized by the applicant. So I could see a couple different proposals being brought forth. And yeah, I think analyzing those as part of a portfolio of solutions for future needs makes sense. So I'll leave it there.
Thank you. On the condition specifically, I support the inclusion of it. I'm going to reserve judgment on what they file in 2026 when we take it up in the future proceeding, like you said. But I think the idea of asking for that to be filed is a good one. And then, there was also discussion regarding energy conservation and demand response about the voluntary nature of those things. And so I'm not requiring this, but I think whatever is filed will probably also have to include some components about outreach and energy literacy and trying to increase the voluntary participation in this in order to make whatever they propose successful.
Thanks to you both. That makes sense to me too.
Okay, moving on to issue 3. We are talking about the energy priority law. Are there any energy priority law options, cost-effective, technically feasible, and environmentally sound alternatives to building the proposed project? So this is Wisconsin Statute Section 1.12 sub 4 and 196.025 sub 1. I did talk about this a little bit in my opening remarks. So here I'll just say that I am at alternative 1, that no EPL alternatives exist that are cost-effective, technically feasible, and environmentally sound alternatives to the proposed project. So first, the modeling in the record did analyze a variety of alternatives, including energy efficiency, demand response, wind, solar, BESS, but the results did not demonstrate that alternative resources are more cost-effective or technically feasible than the proposed project. Our staff did also note that the proposed project was routinely selected as part of the optimal resource package and was less costly in the net present value comparisons when compared directly to many of the resource alternatives of comparable size included in the EPL. I will also say that my analysis considered timing, constructability, and implementability, which is the word I made up, as part of the technical feasibility determination that's included in the EPL law, because I think those are really important aspects to be considered when you're looking at some of these alternative sources. And here I found that the EPL alternatives did fall short on those fronts as well. So I'm at alt 1 on this one. Commissioner Nieto?
Thank you. I was at alt 1 as well. I found this to be consistent with the EPL for many of the reasons you just named. The utility is performing the energy efficiency that state law requires, and we wouldn't require more. energy efficiency under the EPL. And again, the utility is shaping an increasingly renewables-heavy resource mix, which these plants, and this plant in this current docket, bolster, support, and play a part of. So I found the evidence of how this plant operates within an overall responsible, reliable, diverse resource mix to be persuasive. Thanks.
Thank you. Commissioner Hawkins?
Thanks. I am also at alternative one, that no alternatives exist that could replace the proposed project. To me, the modeling did demonstrate that EPL priority resources were chosen in addition to this project and could not fully replace it. As it relates to the modeling of energy efficiency and demand response, I thought they were both sufficient. They were offered as supply resources in the modeling. The expert for Clean Wisconsin in the rebuttal process did acknowledge that the cost treatment of energy efficiency was reasonable, and found that how it was included in the model, they were just agreeing about whether you put it on the demand side versus, or disagreeing on demand versus supply side. So throughout the proceeding, I got a greater level of comfort with how the applicant analyzed energy efficiency. And I recognize that, the commission has a front row seat to the fact that energy efficiency is becoming more expensive and harder to get that low-hanging fruit out of savings. So I certainly recognize that, and that was brought up in the record, that an additional program would be more expensive than the efficient deployment of the focus program that is already in place. I thought the solar and wind resources were given appropriate prices in the modeling, and again, they were selected in said modeling. And I did have a concern with the restriction on wind resources, and given that the need here is for near-term load needs, and there was wind selected in the modeling that was appropriate for what's feasible in the near term and implementable, whatever the chair had said. I don't think that restriction is reasonable longer term, because the model always maxed out on the amount of wind that was selected. It shows to me that a truly optimal portfolio for consumers would include more wind than what the model was allowed to have. That plays in with the applicant's restriction on local resources only, which I did not find to be well supported. Again, not relevant to my decision here because the need is local and urgent, but these are things that I think need to be improved going forward. Lastly, there was a lot of back and forth on the arbitrage value of storage and whether or not that was appropriately considered. BESS is not an EPL resource, but the back and forth was helpful all the same. And flexible resources like CTs and RICE, which we'll discuss later today, are limited from the same lack of modeling granularity on price fluctuations. So that was helpful in supporting what the applicant was claiming. And I'll leave it there.
Thank you. Moving on to issue 4, we are asked if the proposed project, if constructed, will substantially impair the efficiency of applicant service, provide facilities unreasonably in excess of probable future requirements, or add to the cost of service without proportionally increasing the value of service, as specified in Wisconsin Statute Section 196.491, sub 3, sub D5, and 196.49, sub 3, sub B. So for those of you who are following along in our recent high noon buy sell, this was the key statutory criteria that we were considering as well. I'm at alternative 1 on this one. I'm focusing in on the provide facilities unreasonably in excess of probable future requirements language, where we have discretion in defining and determining reasonableness and probable future requirements. So while we've all kind of discussed all the discussion in the record about load growth forecasts and timing, the bottom line here is that the numerous modeling exercises undertaken by the applicant and analyzed by our staff, coupled with other important facts in the record, do demonstrate the need and timing of this project. And because of that, I don't believe that it will impair the efficiency of the applicant service, nor will it provide facilities unreasonably in excess of the probable future requirements or edge the cost of service without proportionally increasing the fair value. So I don't have any issues with the statutory criteria that we are analyzing this within, and therefore I'm at alternative 1.
I'm at alt 1 on this one too for the same reason. Thank you.
I'm at alt 1, but I'm going to take the opportunity to expand on it just a little bit. Just based on what I've seen, a project like this one enables the efficiency of the applicant service. Flexible generation allows the applicant to capitalize on cheaper generation whenever it's available, and that was evident in the modeling outcomes and probably why this was selected by the model as the least cost option. Curtailments of renewables occur when you have lengthy minimum run times or you cannot respond quickly to market prices. And this project successfully avoids both of those problems to the benefit of customers. The commission, again, cannot gamble with reliability, and the commission also can't demand a perfectly efficient, just-in-time matching of resources with customers' needs. We are in pursuit of reasonable matching of resources and needs, and I spoke about the certainty of the load earlier, so I will not beat that horse. When it comes to adding costs and proportionally increasing value to customers, again, I thought the applicant locking in lower costs for the turbines was very helpful to be demonstrated. Repurposing the existing points of interconnection maximizes the value of assets that customers have already paid for. And the certainty of the load growth has been demonstrated in the record. I think lastly, as it relates to facilities in excess of probable future needs, it was really helpful to see the back and forth on the modeling at the different load levels and seeing this project selected even with a very, very large reduction in the future load. So I want to thank the interveners and staff and applicant. Everyone got that modeling put together, and that helped give me comfort that this project is efficient and benefits customers no matter the future load levels.
Thank you. We are now on issue 5, which asks if the proposed project, if constructed, will not unreasonably interfere with the orderly land use and development plans for the area involved as required by Wisconsin statute, section 196.491, sub 3, sub D6. So here I'm at alternative 1, that the project complies with that statute and would not unreasonably interfere with orderly land use and development plans for the area. As I mentioned in my earlier comments, the proposed site is currently owned by the applicant and adjacent to an existing power plant. In the environmental assessment, it was noted that the land is zoned industrial, and I didn't see anything in the record that demonstrates any conflicts with local land use and development plans, let alone unreasonable ones. So for those reasons, I'm at alternative 1.
Thanks. I came to the same conclusions, and I'm at alternative 1 here as well.
Thank you, Commissioner Hawkins.
Alt 1 for me.
Wonderful. Okay, we are now moving on to issue 6, which asks if the proposed project would have a material adverse impact on competition in the relevant wholesale electric service market under Wisconsin statute section 196.491, sub 3, sub D7. Here I'm also at alternative 1, that no, the project would not have a material adverse impact on competition in the wholesale market. There was nothing in the record demonstrating to me that the proposed project would have that adverse impact. So I was fine with alternative 1 on this one. Thank you.
Alternative 1.
Alt 1 for me as well.
Okay, moving on to issue 7. Does the proposed project comply with Wisconsin statute section 196.491, sub 3, sub D8, and use brownfields to the extent practicable? This is one of the ones that I feel like we usually aren't, and now we are. So I'm at alternative 1. The proposed project does use brownfields to the extent practicable. It's being built in a brownfield. So to me, this is a slam dunk, as noted in the EA in my previous comments. This proposed site does comply with it and is located in the brownfield.
Alt 1. Thanks.
Alt 1, share your enthusiasm.
Fill those brownfields up. All right, issue 8 asks if given the requirements for the issuance of the CPCN under Wisconsin statute, section 1.12 sub 4, 196.025, and 196.491 sub 3 sub D, which site alternative, if any, does the commission authorize for the proposed project? So both of the sites here were very similar. I do support the proposed site, which would put me at alternative 1 because it is the less costly option. So that's where I am on this one, Commissioner Nito.
The same alt 1 for this one as well.
And I am at alt 1 for the proposed site as well.
Okay, thank you. So we are now through issue 8, and before we move on to issue 9, I am going to talk a little bit about my cost overrun investigation proposal and just provide a little more detail and information on that before we proceed to our discussion on the various order conditions. So as I noted in my opening remarks, cost overruns continue to be an issue that come before the commission, and we are limited in what we can do to address it at this point. We have discussed the need to develop processes for working through these issues, but up to this point, I think what we've seen is more of a piecemeal, inflexible approach, where I feel we need a more deliberative and structured process. So I really appreciate in this record the efforts of our staff and intervening parties to attempt to address this issue, because I think it shows that it's not just us that's concerned about it, but also that this issue is definitely ripe for further exploration. So the intent of the proposed investigation, in my eyes, it would be an attempt to address and improve how we tackle this issue. It would attempt to develop potential best practices, guidelines, guardrails, whatever you want to call them, to aid in our review of cost overrun related issues and decisions. But it's also mutually beneficial because it would establish consistent and cohesive processes rather than a piecemeal approach across our regulated entities so that they know what to expect and kind of, again, they'd have a seat at the table and be part of the process in developing those best practices and guidelines. I think the investigation would increase awareness, visibility, and foresight into the issue. So what does that mean that this investigation is not intended to do? So this investigation is not intended to micromanage the construction processes of our regulated entities or to encroach on or take away their construction decision-making oversight and authority. I do not intend to create a construction management review and oversight division at the PSC. Been there, done that. I do think that this investigation would gather information, study, review, and analyze a variety of aspects, including but not limited to causes, impacts, management, mitigation, prevention strategies, risk, frequency, timing, location, project types, divisions of work, monitoring, force majeure, and other contract provisions, and an analysis of how other states kind of address this issue. So that's kind of my vision for the scope. Mechanically, in authorizing the investigation, if approved, I think we could direct staff to open the generic investigation of cost overruns and ask them to draft a memo for our consideration outlining that proposed scope, just so we kind of have it written down and on paper. It is important to note that in the interim, nothing that we're talking about in terms of approving or starting an investigation would preclude us or our staff from continuing to work on the issue, including issuing cost overrun related data requests and pulling information as needed on ongoing projects. So this issue would not be kind of set aside and left out until we're ready to kind of move forward with the investigation. I think we would continue to have visibility and attention paid to it in the interim until the investigation's up and running. So that's kind of my, again, vision for this. I think, like Commissioner Nieto mentioned, in working through the various proposals in the record and just thinking about this issue as a whole, it really became apparent to me that this is probably one of the only tools and vehicles we have to try to tackle this the way that I think we probably should. But I am confident that through collaborative efforts that we will be able to produce legally viable, carefully crafted provisions for inclusion in future proceedings. And I hope that you guys can support the creation of the investigation.
Thanks for this proposal. I think it's a good one. I was thinking the same thing as there were just a number of areas of testimony that made me think this goes into the team working on cost overruns bucket, and it started to look a little bit more like a generic investigation than it did what it had been. And I think in intervener testimony, our frustration with the piecemeal approach was directly referenced. So I appreciate folks paying attention and proposing solutions to and specific language with that regard. I am most definitely open to supporting this generic, and I appreciate your comments on, it doesn't mean it's paused while a lengthy generic proceeding goes on. We'll still work on this in the meantime, and I'm assuming kind of be open to project-specific order points as appropriate in cases and all of those different things, but this is something that needs to be open more formally, to your point. So thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Hawkins?
Thanks for laying out your ideas. They sound great and make a lot of sense to me. There was a lot starting to pile up, as Commissioner Nieto just expressed. And I really like the idea of getting a scoping memo back so we can have a more fuller discussion of what's in, what's out. I'm just going to throw something out now to save a red line later, that I'm hopeful that a discussion of the use of PPAs could be a part of that. I think that was brought up by several of the interveners as far as a way to protect consumers from cost overruns. And so while it's not a cost overrun of a project, it's a mechanism that protects from cost overruns. And so I think that should be in scope. And I'll leave it there and look forward to participating.
Thank you. So my management, mitigation, and prevention strategies would probably include your PPA idea.
There we go. I just missed it in there.
No, you didn't miss
There's-
it. I'm just telling you where it would fall in.
Love it.
Thank you. Okay, do you need anything else from us?
So just to clarify, so the commission wants to direct the opening of the generic investigation to examine cost overruns and then direct staff to prepare a scoping memo to be returned to the commission, including the following topics, but not limited to causes, impacts, management, mitigation, and prevention strategies, risk, frequency, timing, and location, project types and divisions of work, monitoring, force majeure, and other contract provisions, as well as how other states address this.
Good job.
Everyone's in agreement? Okay, thanks.
Thank you, guys. Okay, we are moving on now to the proposed conditions. The first to consider is issue 9A about which standard order condition should be attached to construction of the project. Here I am at alternative 2. Sorry, I gotta collect my thoughts here. We have a lot going on in this one. Okay. So for issue 9A, there are a number of standard order conditions, but there are also a couple modifications available to us. So I'm going to talk through those just so it's clear about kind of what I'm proposing. So I am at alternative 2, which would be to include any or all of them, but modifying them as consistent with our discussion. So I generally support the inclusion of them. In the issue listed in 9A, these provide reasonable guardrails, but there are a few that I think we need to just discuss. First is the staff proposed addition to the general reporting condition in issue 9. We're going to take that up when we get to issue 10A of the decision matrix, so I'm going to work through the ones here first. So first, I would remove condition 6, which I believe was erroneously included here. That condition is largely intended for projects where third-party merchant developers are the applicants because those merchant developers do not have eminent domain rights. Here, Webco is not a merchant developer. This condition does not apply to them, and therefore it should be removed. You guys have heard me talk a lot about not wanting duplicative and unnecessary conditions included, especially if they're conflicting or confusing, and so that's what this is. So my first action in modifying the conditions in 9A would be to remove condition little Roman numeral 6. Next, the labor reporting requirements in Roman numeral 9, sub-items 5 through 7. So again, you guys have all heard my take on these, especially when applicants contest them, which continues to baffle me. So here, all I'm going to say is, given the applicant's statement on this condition about their strong working relationship with labor, and that they're already working with local Wisconsin contractors and labor unions to ensure available local craft labor for this project, they should have no issues complying with these simple quarterly reporting requirements, and that I look forward to reviewing these reports because it sounds like they will include some really exciting and successful data highlighting their efforts and collaboration on these important initiatives. So I would include the entirety of condition 9, sub-items 5 through 7 as necessary for approval of the project. Finally, I will discuss the line of sight condition, which is Roman numeral 14, Roman numeral 14. So in recent transmission construction proceedings, the commission has considered this condition as a standalone decision item, and we have found it reasonable to direct the applicant to mitigate line of sight communications for landowners that can show disruption to broadcast communications post-construction. There was a little bit of discussion about the applicability of this, and I appreciate why staff would include this directive in the standard order conditions in this docket. And the record the record supporting the condition was largely predicated on its inclusion in prior construction dockets. So while it's not super clear about the relationship of line of sight broadcast interruptions being comparable or applicable to the type of construction that's contemplated in this document, I think it's probably, instead of removing it, a little more appropriate to take the measured approach, which would just be to modify it to say to the extent practicable in case something were to arise where there's an interruption occurring. So adding the clause, which we've done in the past to help kind of soften some of these, to the extent practicable, the applicant shall mitigate impacts to line of sight communications and landowners who can show disruption to broadcast communications post-construction. So again, it's just a simple clause that's an addition. We've employed it in prior conditions, and I think it can work here as well. And I would encourage our staff to consider the applicability of this condition kind of on a project-specific basis going forward. Because again, I think it's a little questionable about its inclusion here. So for this item, 9A, I'm at alternative 2 with the modifications discussed, which are to remove 6 and add extent practicable to 14. Commissioner Nito?
Thank you. I am with you. I'm at alt 2, would definitely remove 6. Support what you said on the importance of the labor conditions, and I think that as practicable is a good modification to some of the line of sight issue contention, so thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Hawkins?
I'm at alt 2 as well. I'm fine with removal of Romanet 6.
Thank you, Romanette. There you go.
And
New words today.
and I'll leave it there.
Okay, thank you.
Just to clarify, Commissioner Hawkins, you're also in agreement on including all of condition 9 and the modification then
To the extent
14?
practicable, yes.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, moving on to issue 9B. Is the following cost overrun condition requested by the applicant reasonable to impose a condition of approval? So obviously, we just had a very nice, robust conversation about cost overruns. Here I am at alternative 3. So in the standard order conditions we just approved in 9A, Romanet 3 says in part, quote, if it is discovered or identified that the project cost, including force majeure costs, may exceed the estimated cost excluding AFUDC, the applicant shall, within 30 days of when it becomes aware of the possible change or cost increase, notify the commission of the accounts or categories where the costs deviate from those authorized, and shall itemize and segregate those costs by major accounts and provide sufficient documentation to support and explain the reasons for such deviations, unquote. So as stated in our decision matrix, this has been commission practice, commission position since 2023 when we started to move away from the 10% threshold proposed by the applicant in this issue. In advocating for the 10% tolerance band, the applicant attempted to distinguish between self-developed generation projects like this one, arguing that it is inappropriate to impose the hard cap with no cushion on those, as compared to buy-build projects undertaken by merchant developers, upon which the commission has imposed a hard cap for the last couple of years and the applicant is fine with. Given the issues we are experiencing with cost overruns, I'm not comfortable reverting to the 10% threshold, regardless of project type. It's important to note that the hard cap does not preclude cost overruns, though obviously we strongly prefer that they don't occur, nor is it a prejudgment on recoverability of cost overruns. It's simply a requirement that the commission receives notification and information about potential cost overruns within 30 days of their discovery or identification. Furthermore, on the information provision piece, I want to reiterate particular language in the approved order condition, specifically that if the applicant is notifying us that the project cost may exceed the estimated cost, as part of the notification, the applicant shall, quote, itemize and segregate those costs by major accounts and provide sufficient documentation to support and explain the reasons for such deviations. To be crystal clear, sufficient documentation to support and explain the reasons means the documentation and information must be forthcoming, substantive, thorough, and detailed. And if it's not, we'll continue to issue data requests until it is. So again, I think this is another example of not setting the issue aside while we wait for the investigation to unfold. We also did just impose the hard cap on a project that was merchant developed, but is now self-developed. So there is a little bit of precedent for this as well. So for those reasons, I'm at alt 3. Commissioner Nito.
Thank you. I am at alt 3 as well, and for very similar reasons to those you just articulated well. Thank you.
Same here. I'm at alt 3 as well. I thought you explained the reasoning perfectly, and I'll just note that, 10% of $1.5 billion is $150 million with some fast math. So that's a great reason why the hard cap is appropriate here.
Thank you for doing math on the fly. Okay. Issue 9C is about stray voltage conditions. So here I am at alternative 2, which would be the stray voltage order condition as revised by staff is necessary for the approval of the proposed project. So typically, stray voltage testing is a standard condition because it's an important issue that we continue to take seriously. The applicant's position on this condition is seemingly predicated on the fact that the wording of this standard condition usually references working with the applicable distribution utility, but here the applicant is the applicable distribution utility, and therefore they feel this condition is unnecessary. Removing the stray voltage condition would be inconsistent with prior decisions. Furthermore, the commission has applied this order condition in prior dockets where the project builder was itself the applicable distribution utility. So this is not an unprecedented situation. I think that the slight modification proposed by our staff to remove distribution utility references is a reasonable fix because it fixes the wording while maintaining the substance of the stray voltage condition. So for those reasons, I am at alternative 2 on this one.
Thank you. I am at alternative 2 as well, for similar reasons and with that modified language. Thanks.
Commissioner Hawkins?
Alt 2 for me, nothing to add.
Thank you. Okay, we are now moving towards some other project-specific conditions in issue 10. So 10A asks if the competitive bid reporting proposed by our staff is reasonable to impose as a condition of approval. Here I am at alternative 2, that the proposed condition as modified by the commission is necessary for approval of the proposed project. The alternatives in the wording here are a little confusing. They also are not consistent with this issue in Paris. So I want to try to be as clear as possible about my position on this proposed condition. So I do support including a condition related to competitive bidding, and I'm comfortable with incorporating competitive bid reporting into the standard quarterly reporting condition previously discussed and approved in issue 9A to help alleviate administrative burden. I would slightly modify the competitive bid reporting condition by adding as applicable language that was included in staff's initial suggestion of this condition. Therefore, the competitive bid reporting condition would be incorporated into standard quarterly reporting condition 9 condition Romanet 9 as sub-item 5 and be modified to read, quote, as applicable, comma, a summary of competitive bids received within the quarter, comma, if any, comma, for work to be performed and equipment to be procured as part of the project. I believe because of that position, I'm at alt 2. Correct me if I'm wrong, council, but I also believe because we are at alt 2 for the standard order conditions in 9A, which allows for modification, that we don't need to adjust our decision on that specific item.
I think so, yeah, I think it's clear. So this modification would replace where it was previously in 9A, is what you're saying?
Correct.
Got it.
It would be in addition to 9A, is Romanet 5. Yep.
You're right.
Yep. Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm at alt 2 here as well, with that same addition you just discussed, and Chair Strand with your addition of the as applicable language as well.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
And I'm in the same place. I think this is another example of the cost overrun issues that we can take action on monitoring this in real time while also further developing this topic of competitive bids in the newly created generic. So looking forward to that.
Yes, definitely part of the scope. Thank you for adding that. All right, moving on to issue 10B about a cost overrun condition proposed by Cub. Here I'm at alternative 3. I do appreciate the efforts of this intervener to propose various conditions intended to help address cost overrun issues. Change orders are an important component of construction project management, especially changes with cost implications. However, I don't find this condition necessary for approval of this project. Even though this condition is specifically related to change orders, the previously approved standard order conditions in 9A do include reporting requirements that will provide the commission with similar information regarding cost increases, in-service date changes, significant scope changes, et cetera, that this condition would also cover. Further, I am concerned about the impact this condition could have on commission workload, which is already at an all-time high, and the subjectivity and vastness of sub B also give me pause. Instead of including this condition here, I do think the topic of change orders should absolutely be included in the scope of our cost overrun investigation. This will allow the commission to determine how we want to address change orders from a high level, more holistic approach rather than piecemeal through individual dockets. There is a lot to learn about change orders, such as the type of information typically included on EPC change orders for utility scale construction projects, the average number of change orders processed on these types of projects, an applicant's internal process for reviewing and approving or denying change orders, et cetera, all of which would be more fleshed out through the investigation. Therefore, for this item, I'm at alternative 3.
Thank you. I'll join you at alternative 3 for this one, including what you just described about adding it to the generic, and I think we have a good starting point here with this information.
Thank you. Commissioner Hawkins?
And I will join my colleagues at alt 3.
Thank you. 10C is another intervener proposed condition. This one relates to the in-service date delay notification condition. So here I'm also at alternative 3 for somewhat similar reasons. So our standard order conditions that we approved in item 9A require the submission of quarterly reports that, among other information, must include summaries of the status of construction, the anticipated in-service date, and the overall percent of physical completion every quarter. So the in-service date delay notification condition proposed in this issue is duplicative and not necessary. I do note that there's a minor difference in this one, that it also includes the MISO resource accreditation determination delay, but to me, that's not enough to justify the inclusion of this condition and the other one. So I'm more comfortable with staying with what we approved in 9A. So for those reasons, I'm at alternative 3.
Thanks, alt 3 as well.
I'm at alt 3 as well. I don't believe this accreditation piece is actually even impacted. You can bring a resource on partway through the year, and the applicant certainly has the incentive to bring a generator online as fast as possible. So I support alt 3 here.
Thank you. Also, like we talked about, if we're trying this cost overrun, schedule impacts are one of the things that we want to investigate. So I think there's a hook there too. Okay, issue 10D asks if the following conditions approved by Cub witness Edward Burgess are reasonable to impose as conditions of approval. Here I'm at alt 3. At best, I do think some of these proposals are on shaky legal ground, including that there are statutes in place that preclude the commission from directing utilities to take on additional energy efficiency measures. I am comforted by the fact that we already approved Commissioner Nietzsche's condition regarding demand response initiatives in a future rate case filing. So I do feel that that proposal in this item has been somewhat taken care of through your earlier condition. Further, it's not clear to me that the commission has the authority to direct the applicant to begin a competitive solicitation for BESS and incremental BESS resources at Oak Creek in lieu of this proposed project. And cost recovery is not an issue in this docket. The approved standard order conditions, again, in issue 9A, clearly state that consistent with our past practice that we will review in a future rate proceeding the recoverability of costs associated with the proposed project. So these conditions as proposed for those reasons are not reasonable to be included in this CPCN, which again puts me at alternative 3.
Alt 3 as well, and I thought a lot of the issues that are covered here are, to your point, have been covered in other areas of our discussion and in order points, those that are viable options. I thought the laying out of the options was helpful to my review, though. Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, I agree with everything Commissioner Nieto just said. I'm at Alt 3 and appreciated seeing them and appreciate seeing where we've connected and already handled some of these topics throughout the proceeding.
Thank you. Issue 10E lists project-specific force majeure conditions proposed by Cub witness Corey Singletary and asks if they're reasonable to impose as a condition of approval in the project. Obviously, like we talked about earlier, force majeure would be a specific topic within the scope of our cost overrun investigation. I do appreciate the intervener's work to assemble the suggested list. This issue brings to light the relationship between cost overruns and force majeure, where cost overruns are sometimes attributed to force majeure events that subsequently result in increased project costs that exceed initial estimates. But here I'm at alternative 3 because accepting this proposed condition would require us to prematurely overprescribe, dictate, and define what does and does not constitute force majeure. While I do not think this is an appropriate and advisable action for us to take in this docket, more importantly, the Commission is not in an informed enough position to do so. The legally complex and evolving nature of force majeure clauses and their interplay with cost overruns do warrant further exploration and therefore should absolutely be included in the scope of the cost overrun investigation that we have discussed and authorized today, especially since we've seen events claiming force majeure use as reasoning or justification for cost overruns on our projects within the recent past. So again, I find the list of potential events helpful, but I don't think we're in a position to start prescribing those things at this time. So I'm at Alt 3 on this one. Thank you.
Alt 3 as well, and I thought the same about the cost overrun investigation. This, again, gives us a good starting point and quite a few ideas, and I think this is one of those issues that, as I read through the record, made me think about just that broader bucket of cost overruns and exactly what your proposal was, so thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Hawkins?
I'm at Alt 3 as well. Only thing I'd add is that the EPC contract is already in place, and I don't want to order any changes to that without understanding what the cost impacts might be for those changes. So agree, this gives us a solid starting point for getting to a more informed place on force majeure, and I appreciate that. Alt 3 for me.
Thank you. Issue 10F asks if the following proxied cost disciplines proposed by WIG witness Randall Pilo are reasonable to impose as conditions of approval. For this item, I'm also at alternative 3 that none of the proxied cost disciplines listed are necessary for approval. I do appreciate the WIG witness's contributions to the record on this and other important issues, but I'm not at all convinced that the Commission has the authority to order some of these proxied cost disciplines. To me, they may not be legally viable under the current framework, nor are they necessary for approval of the proposed project. A few of them are addressed or partially addressed by previously discussed and approved order conditions, and potentially could fall under the scope of our cost overrun investigation, but I didn't see any compelling reason to include them in total here now. So alternative 3.
Same for me. I was at alternative 3. I thought this discussion was helpful as well, and I thought some of these items we've already covered, like you said, and some items we would cover in other places, so the cost overrun generic, and also specifically, for instance, with regard to stranded costs, I think Commissioner Hawkins, you might have brought up earlier, Chairperson Strand, you did as well. Those are items that we would take a look at under, say, like very large customer tariffs and rate cases and in some other areas too, so appreciated the helpful discussion.
Thank you. Commissioner Hawkins?
Thanks. No offense to my former boss, Mr. Pilo, but I'm also at alternative 3 here as well. We're already imposing the hard cap as was discussed. And as Commissioner Nieto was just saying, we have authority to deal with some of the facets of stranded asset costs in other proceedings. And, just generally the applicant has an opportunity to earn return on investment once it goes into service. And should anything change, the Commission can consider that at a future date. So I'm comfortable not including these here.
Thank you. Issue 10G asks if the following project-specific environmental resources conditions are reasonable to impose as a condition of approval. Here I am at alternative 1. So in previous dockets, I have objected to the inclusion of similar conditions due to my concerns that they were somewhat unnecessary and duplicative, which could negatively impact projects through higher costs and schedule delays. However, for this project, I will support them given the relatively uncontested nature of these issues, including that the applicant is not opposed to Alt 1 and has agreed to mitigate potential drainage, erosion, and stormwater management issues through plans approved by the DNR. I do want to reiterate my off-stated comments that in future dockets, I expect conditions labeled project-specific to be just that, conditions that are distinct and relevant to the unique aspects of the project and its specific location, and not identical conditions cut and pasted from docket to docket. I'm not sure why we aren't seeing this yet, reflected in our project-specific conditions in DNR, by DNR in our construction dockets before us, given that I think we have been kind of through the lag of like when we said it versus what's in front of us now. But I hope and expect to see them coming soon. So here I'm at alternative 1.
Thank you. I'm at Alt 1 for this one as well.
Alt 1 here.
Thank you. Issue 11 is uncontested, so we do not need to discuss that today. Issue 12A asks if the commission has complied with WEPA pursuant to Wisconsin Statute Section 1.11 and Wisconsin Administrative Code Chapter PSC 4. As succinctly stated in this commission staff's position on this issue, yes, the commission has complied with WEPA, which puts me at alternative 1.
Alternative 1, thank you.
Alt 1 for me as well.
Thank you. Issue 12B asks if the proposed project will have undue adverse impacts on other environmental values as provided under Wisconsin Statute Section 196.491, Sub 3, Sub D4. Here as well, I'm at alternative 1. No, the proposed project will not have undue adverse impacts on other environmental values. Commission staff, in partnership with the DNR, prepared an environmental assessment for this project that reviewed various environmental considerations and analyzed a range of potential impacts. These impacts can be avoided, mitigated, or controlled through compliance with DNR permitting and plans, order conditions, and other actions. And I did not find evidence in the EA or other parts of the record that the project would have undue adverse impacts on environmental values. And I think I said earlier too that the DNR actually included that this project would reduce regulated emissions compared to the status quo at the Oak Creek Power Plant. So for those reasons, I'm at alternative 1 here.
Thank you, and I came to the same place, alternative 1.
Same place, Alt 1.
Thank you. Issue 13, our final issue on this project asks if the commission should grant a CPCN for the proposed project. Here I'm at alternative 2. Yes, the commission should grant the CPCN with the conditions discussed today. So based on our discussion, I'm at alternative 2.
Alternative 2.
Alternative 2 here as well.
Okay. Thank you both very much for your contributions to our discussion. We are ready for a motion on this docket.
In docket 6630 CE 317, I move we grant a CPCN consistent with our discussion today.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Thank you. We are going to take a quick break between dockets. Let's reconvene in 15 minutes, if that works for everyone. Okay, so see you at 12:35-ish. Thank you. Okay, we are back. Before we move on to docket 6630 CE 316, legal counsel did bring to our attention that the amount of intervenor compensation funding read aloud in item 15, docket 1 IC 572 earlier was slightly incorrect. So we're just going to revisit that motion and correct that amount now, and then we'll move on to our next project.
In docket 1 IC 572, I move we fund Blacks for Political and Social Action of Dane County an IC request in the amount of $86,284.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much. All right, now we will take up docket 6630, CE 316, agenda item, our last agenda item for the day. The application of Wisconsin Electric Power Company to receive a CPCN for the authority to construct, own, and operate the Paris Reciprocating Internal Combustion Engine, or RICE project. Comprised of 7 generators, each with a capacity of 18.8 megawatts, the facility would have a total capacity of approximately 128 megawatts. The project also includes a 138 kilovolt generator tie line, or gen tie line, that would run from the new RICE facility to the existing Paris Solar Collector substation. The project would be located adjacent to the existing Lakeshore Capacity Improvement Project Regulator Station, I need an acronym for that, on a parcel owned by Wisconsin Electric Power Company in the town of Paris near Union Grove, Wisconsin. An environmental impact statement was prepared jointly by Commission and DNR staff in accordance with WEPA. The purpose of the EIS was to provide the Commission, the public, and other stakeholders with an analysis of the economic, social, cultural, and environmental impacts that could result from the construction of the proposed project. There will be further discussion of environmental impacts as we work through our various decision items in our decision matrix. The construction of the proposed project would cost approximately $279.6 million, with an additional allowance for funds used during construction estimate of $23.7 million. Similar to the Oak Creek docket, this proceeding garnered a lot of interest from participating parties and the public. In addition to the 466 public comments filed through the PSC website, Citizens Utility Board, the City of Milwaukee, Clean Wisconsin, Kenosha County, Renew Wisconsin, the Town of Paris, the Wisconsin Industrial Energy Group, and the Wisconsin Local Government Climate Coalition were parties to this proceeding. Thank you to all the interveners. We appreciate your efforts and contributions to the docket. Also similar to the OCCT proposal, the proposed Paris RICE project is intended to assist the applicant in meeting obligations for significant new load that is anticipated to enter the applicant's service territory within the next couple of years. According to the application, RICE technology is an optimal resource choice as it offers flexibility in meeting load demands and can efficiently serve as a complement to solar and wind resources due to RICE's fast startup and ramping capabilities, which allows grid operators to deal with sudden decreases in wind or solar intensity. The applicant specifically cited resource dispatchability and resource diversity as key criteria for consideration in the development of its resource portfolio, and noted that combined with the OCCT project just approved, the two resources are intended to provide a complementary mix of dispatchable technology that provides overall benefits to the grid. Given many of the similarities, and because we just worked through the Oak Creek docket, I will spare everyone from having to hear the same thing twice as related to the role of the commission, our regulatory framework, community engagement, and other missed opportunities, similar order conditions, and cost overruns. A side-by-side comparison of these two dockets would show that many of the issues are identical. However, there are some unique features of this record, particularly regarding modeling, interconnection constraints, and project siting, that I will touch on first before moving to our actual decision items. On the topic of modeling, I'll briefly note that this docket included extensive modeling analysis that reviewed several planning features and sensitivities. Ultimately, the results of the modeling and sensitivity analysis show this project is generally picked as a best resource, and there was sufficient evidence in the record demonstrating how the Paris RICE project is an approvable application. To be clear, there were certain modeling sensitivities that didn't pick Paris. For example, modeling that removed greenhouse gas restrictions selected a larger baseload generation of combined cycle units rather than the Paris RICE units. So absent the GHG rules, modeling shows additional natural gas could provide greater economic benefits, but that's not what's before us today. Additionally, under a sensitivity where demands are greatly reduced, the modeling did not demonstrate a need for the proposed Paris RICE project. I understand why intervening parties would take the position that if only a fraction of anticipated load comes online, the Commission should not authorize the project because there's evidence suggesting the facility is not needed. It's reasonable to question whether load additions will materialize as proposed, but the record in this proceeding included a lot of evidence to support a significant load addition. And it's a normal and expected practice from a resource planning perspective to develop resource plans to meet a forecasted load. Furthermore, the modeling analysis does demonstrate that Paris is reasonably selected as a resource to meet those forecasted needs. While I very much appreciate the analysis of the participating parties and believe they make decent arguments in favor of alternative resources and things to consider, the record did not demonstrate that other renewable resources or conservation efforts would reasonably or economically address the future needs that the Paris project is intended to meet. It is also important to recognize the record of evidence does not point to the applicant moving away from his renewable resource portfolio. In fact, the record referenced pending applications to acquire wind, solar, and BESS facilities. Utilities such as WEBCO proceed with their overall transition to carbon-free resources under their own volition and decisions, and it's paramount that they take a measured and methodical approach. Here, the record included a lot of compelling evidence in support of the Rice Technologies' ability to complement WEBCO's diverse renewable resource mix while providing the utility with reliable dispatchable generation. While solar and wind are crucial for decarbonizing the energy sector, and this commission has a history of approving renewable resource projects, including the applicant's recent acquisition of solar and BESS facilities, dispatchable generation does play a complementary role in ensuring grid reliability and stability as renewable penetration increases. While one witness noted that these types of dispatchable resources can be thought of as insurance for those hours when renewable generation is not available, I think that's a fair assessment and supported by the record of evidence in this proceeding and a helpful way to view these projects. Ultimately, regarding the many concerns that were expressed about the uncertainty of prospective new load and the need for the project, I did find, similar to Oak Creek, the record demonstrated the applicant was responsive to the intervener's concerns and demonstrated that customer protecting mechanisms are in place. In addition to modeling and project needs, concerns were also raised about interconnection constraints, specifically concerns about surplus interconnection service and the economic benefits of Paris Rice being overstated due to limited interconnection capacity. I do share some of these concerns when I was reviewing the record. However, I recognize in my discussion of prior construction cases, it's not always possible to perfectly time resources with need, and ultimately I found the applicant did include ample information in the record that addressed any of these concerns. I was persuaded that the effects of interconnection availability and the output of the Paris Rice project are likely to be minimal and limited to just the first few years of operation. WEBCO witness Haggerty's testimony was especially helpful as it demonstrated that using surplus service is unlikely to significantly impact the economic benefits of the Paris Rice project because the output of the units is projected to primarily occur during high-priced non-solar hours. Overall, the applicant witness addressed the stated concerns about economic benefits and accreditation as it relates to the interconnection of the Paris Rice facility. That was also a theme of the Oak Creek docket, and this one, time and again, while many valid questions were raised about the viability of the proposed projects, the applicant was able to provide substantive and responsive answers. Due to the body of evidence in this proceeding, as well as the statutory framework I discussed in the Oak Creek docket, I do support the issuance of a CPCN for requested capacity of approximately 128 megawatts and a Gentile line with conditions. The one issue I feel there may be some loose ends to tie up is the actual siting of the project. WEBCO did evaluate 3 potential locations: its proposed site, alternative site 1, and alternative site 2. All 3 sites are located in the town of Paris and Kenosha. To me, the record demonstrates that while all 3 sites may be viable and there are positive and negatives associated with each site, it's a close call. I'll have additional comments to share on that issue and associated issues as we work through the decision points, but wanted to raise it as an example where this docket does differ from the Oak Creek proceeding. At this point, I will invite my colleagues to share any opening comments they have, and then we will start working through the decision matrix. Commissioner Nieto.
Thank you. I'll echo again your thanks regarding the public comments we received and the participation of interveners and the work that staff did on this docket as well. Similar to you, I think you framed up this docket. I won't repeat a lot of what I said in the previous docket, and like you said, the differences come in with regard to the differences of the RICE units and how they fit into the modeling, as well as the siting question. I would not repeat my demand response condition here because it's already taken care of in the other docket, but I would repeat the load forecast condition in this docket as well. So thank you.
Thank you. I'll support it again as well. Commissioner Hawkins?
Thanks. Yeah, I want to thank everyone that participated, especially the town of Paris in all of our proceedings. When we get local bodies of government participating, it's really helpful for me. Coming from the village of Bristol, Paris was our fierce sports rival. But since I was in band, that rivalry does not affect my judgment in any way. So big picture again, for me, reliability is number one. The commission's job is to protect ratepayers. A lot of those protections that we talked about in Oak Creek are relevant here again. And once again, the anticipated load growth was central focus. A key differentiator on this one for me was under the topic of urgency. And so while this project was impacted by the urgency of the load growth, just like Oak Creek was, it played out in a slightly different way in this project. I mentioned earlier that the commission is adapting to this urgency of new demands on the electric system while maintaining our high standards of work. And the same is expected for the applicant as it develops projects to serve the public. The involvement of the public is very purposeful and not a source of slowdown, and one that must be appreciated in proposals brought before us. And I can assure you that the involvement of the public is fully appreciated by the commission throughout our decision-making and is a key ingredient of our regulatory recipe. So I just wanted to stress that and connect it to the involvement of the town of Paris. And I do want to flag another different aspect of this proceeding that I had a major concern with was the suggestion by the applicant that this CPCN process suggests the project be used and supported by the commission in an unapproved FERC process. I thought that was totally inappropriate, and if the applicant requires a theoretical process to maintain reliability in the years ahead, we have bigger problems on our hands. The applicant rightly points out that the efficiency and reliability benefits of this point of interconnection are very valuable, and I agree. And accepting the limitations of the interconnection is a foundational concept of an open access transmission system. So I was really glad to see those things modeled and debated by interveners, and I think this project still has benefits with those limitations in place. The applicant also stated that this FERC-regulated process would not allow solar and wind to participate in it, which is not true. And so I just wanted to flag that I thought it was inappropriate to be raised in this CPCN proceeding. I had concerns with the substance of the statements made by the applicant, and I'll leave it there.
Thank you. Do you,
I also support
yep, and do you want to include your
this.
related action action item that was added onto her condition from
Yes, which was the
the 30-day
timeline.
notice?
Yes,
And,
I support that as well.
okay,
Yep.
perfect. So I think, just to be clear, that we are, sorry, we didn't even get to one yet, did we? But you said you were gonna, yes.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
sorry, yes. Well,
We can revisit.
yes, exactly. All right, sorry. Jumping guns. Okay, so if everyone's okay, first of all, thank you guys for your opening comments. I appreciate hearing your perspectives on those things. So we'll move then to issue 1, which asks if the proposed project, if constructed, satisfies the reasonable needs of the public for an adequate supply of electric energy. Here I am at alternative 1, that the proposed project, if constructed, will satisfy the reasonable needs of the public for an adequate supply of energy. As I noted in my opening remarks, the Paris project did undergo a thorough review by staff and intervening parties. The record sufficiently demonstrates an expected capacity need, and the proposed project was routinely scrutinized and selected in the modeling analysis. Through rounds of discovery and testimony, it did still hold up under many scenarios and sensitivities. As I mentioned, there were some under which the Rice project wasn't selected, but I do feel the record sufficiently addresses those results and demonstrates that the project does meet the standards of the applicable statute here. So for those reasons, I'm at alternative 1. Commissioner Nato?
I am at alternative 1 as well for this issue. Similar to the Oak Creek CT project, I also in addition to looking at the modeling testimonies and exhibits around need, looked at the discussion of risk related to the reasonable need, and found there was a higher bar to clear with this significant cost attributable to one very large cost causer. And so the condition that I'm proposing is, in the event that the very large customer's load forecast significantly decreases, the applicant shall notify the commission within 30 days and take all appropriate customer protection measures detailed in applicant testimony and exhibits or any approved future tariff. Thanks.
Thank you. Commissioner Hawkins?
That is what I support. And for this one, I am also at alternative one. I stated my analysis of the need and the load coming on and the certainty related to that earlier in the Oak Creek. That same line of thinking applies here. We confirmed a gap in the available resources. The modeling supports that need. And so I found that the modeling helped me get comfortable that this is a reasonable need of the public. And one thing I didn't state earlier that I really was happy to see staff push on and interveners as well, was that the need should be measured in the unit of measurement that the applicant uses to demonstrate compliance or reliability at the grid operator, which is the accreditation used by MISO. The application came in a very less than helpful measure of ICAP, which is not appropriate. And so the modeling in UCAP and modifications that were made by the applicant to demonstrate the usefulness of this project and that it still pencils out with the appropriate accreditation in place was really key for me. And so I was really glad that the record got there. It didn't start there, and that required a lot more additional reading that couldn't hopefully be avoided in the future. So I just think it makes perfect sense that the need that the applicant must meet to show that it has sufficient resources at the grid operator should be the same unit of measurement that we use in our proceedings here. So that's all I'll add on that one.
Thank you.
And then just to be clear, you support.
Yep. Thank you for asking. You good? Okay. Issue 2 asks if the proposed project is in the public interest, considering alternative sources of supply, alternative locations, individual hardships, engineering, economic, safety, reliability, and environmental factors pursuant to Wisconsin statute. Section 196.491, sub 3, sub D3. Let's see, here, again, very similar to my comments in Oak Creek, the record does contain voluminous analysis of modeling efforts that demonstrated the project is a cost-effective resource that will provide reliable and dispatchable energy. So for those reasons and the reasons discussed in our previous docket, I'm at alternative 1 on this issue.
Thank you. Similar to Chair Strand, I'm at Alt 1, and also found that the results of the very robust modeling scenarios and sensitivities in this case demonstrated that the Paris-Rice project was part of the optimal resource mix across all of those, or across many of those different reasonable assumptions. And with that, I was at alternative 1, finding the proposed project is in the public interest considering the statutory factors. Thanks.
Thank you. Commissioner Hawkins?
I'm at Alt 1 as well. Again, appreciated the back and forth that improved the modeling. I thought that the one thing that was heavily fought about was the assumption on battery energy storage costs, and I thought that the testimony did prove out that the assumptions were reasonable and that there's a range of reasonable assumptions that could be used, and so appreciated seeing all that information brought before us. We talked about demand response and conservation in Oak Creek. Those same things apply here. There was another unique piece on this one, a suggestion by an intervener that a smaller increment of RICE units be considered as an option, and the back and forth with the applicant was helpful. That demonstrated that the per unit cost was not appropriately calculated in some of the filed modeling by an intervener, and so that was very insightful and helpful in supporting that the Paris Rice as applied for is a sensible choice here. So for all those reasons, I am at Alt 1 on this one.
Thank you. Moving on to issue 3, which is the energy priority law question, asking about EPL options that are cost-effective, technically feasible, and environmentally sound alternatives to building the proposed project. Again, we had a good discussion of this statute and the process in our previous docket. Here I'm also at alternative 1, that no EPL alternatives exist that are cost-effective, technically feasible, and environmentally sound alternatives to the proposed project. Again, the modeling in the record included a variety of resource alternatives, including energy efficiency, demand response, wind, solar, and BESS. The record, to me, did not demonstrate that these other renewable resources that are ranked higher in the EPL would more reasonably address the future needs that the Paris Rice project is intended to meet, especially as it relates to cost effectiveness and technical feasibility. Again, I'll note that a few modeling sensitivities did not produce the level of cost savings results that were demonstrated in the Oak Creek docket, but that the overall record of evidence did show that the Rice project is cost effective and technically feasible as it compares to those other resources. So again, for that reason, for all of those reasons, I'm at alternative 1 on the EPL question.
Alternative 1 for me as well. Again, I found the arguments and evidence that the utility is shaping an increasingly renewables-heavy resource mix to be compelling, and I found that this plant, in conjunction with the Oak Creek CT plant, will bolster support and play a part of that mix, and together with some of the additional discussion we had on demand response that carries over into this docket, I was also at Alt 1 on the EPL. Thanks.
Thank you. Commissioner Hawkins?
Thanks. I'm at Alt 1 as well, and I just wanted to clarify that I believe this one should be reworded. In Oak Creek, it said no EPL alternatives exist or are cost-effective, and this one just says no EPL alternatives exist that are cost-effective. So I may have accidentally deleted that out in my own version.
You might have, because mine says no.
Okay. I just want to make sure the double no still exists.
Mine says no. Like yours.
Okay, all right. Well, you cleaned yours up. So anyhow, just want to clarify that. And then I want to underscore what the chair raised on one of the sets of alternatives that got a lot of attention in the record related to other technologies that could have been selected. And those were in cases where there were no greenhouse gas restrictions in the model. A different large gas unit was chosen. And in addition to that, more batteries were chosen. And so in that case, emissions go up, different technologies. So in answering this question of whether or not other alternatives could replace this project, I found that answer to be no. The other cases where it was attempted to demonstrate that different portfolios could meet the need assumed low or zero load growth and a large quantity of EE and DR, which we talked about earlier today. So the need that we're faced with here in this proceeding could not be met by the alternatives, and so that's why I'm at alternative 1 with 2 no's in the language. And yeah, that's all I have.
Thank you. Issue 4 asks if the proposed project, if constructed, will substantially impair the efficiency of the applicant's service, provide facilities unreasonably in excess of probable future requirements, or add to the cost of service without proportionately increasing the value of service. Here I am at alternative 1, identical to my comments on Oak Creek. The key statutory criteria for me were the provide facilities unreasonably in excess of probable future requirements language. Again, we do have discretion in defining and determining the reasonableness and probable future requirements. So I did appreciate the robust discussion in the record about load growth forecasts and timing. But for me, again, the bottom line was that the numerous exercises undertaken by the applicant, staff, and interveners, coupled with other important facts from the record, do demonstrate the need and timing to support this project. And that because of that, I felt that the statutory criteria in the statute were not met, and therefore I'm at alternative 1. Commissioner Nito?
And alternative 1, again, on this one as well. Thanks.
Thank you. Commissioner Hawkins?
I'm at Alt 1 as well. I think this project enables efficiency. The model showed that alternatives did not meet the expected load growth, and the model did not build more expensive options, or they were infeasible technically. This analysis also demonstrated that the costs associated with this project are necessary to enable greater deployments of variable generation while maintaining reliability and minimizing costs. And again, I think it is critically important that this is even further than at Oak Creek, that the use of the existing point of interconnection, this is being hyper maximized in this case. And so I think that is a benefit to customers, and I'm excited to see the surplus interconnection process be utilized perhaps for the first time. And that was, I thought, a great demonstration of efficiency. And so, yeah, that is why I'm at Alt 1.
Thank you. Issue 5 asks if the proposed project, if constructed, will not unreasonably interfere with the orderly land use and development plans for the area. If my colleagues are comfortable with this, because the siting issue in issue 5 relates to the site selection discussion and decision in issue 8, and there is interplay between those two, I figured if you guys are okay with it, maybe we'll just kind of talk about both of them at once, issue 5 and issue 8. Okay, I think it's hard to weigh in on one and not the other, basically. So, as I noted in my opening remarks, there were 3 potential locations evaluated for this facility. The applicant's proposed site, alternative site 1, and alternative site 2. The record sufficiently demonstrated that the 3 sites were all viable, but for me, my decision came down to picking between the applicant's proposed site and alternative site 2. Again, I think to echo Commissioner Hawkins' comments, I do appreciate the local unit of government, the town of Paris's intervention on this, and the information and participation that they provided to the record, especially on these citing points. And I think that the concerns raised are valid. And so I did definitely take those things into consideration when reviewing issue 5 and issue 8. Also, just to be clear, there are some citing components that touch issues 10F and 12B. I don't think that they're as necessary to take up at the same time with 5 and 8, but this issue is kind of woven into all 4 of those decision points. So, again, the applicant's proposed site is located near the Paris Solar Collector substation, which, again, as the Commissioner Hawkins just stated, allows the project to take advantage as quickly as possible of the expedited interconnection procedures available at the site. It houses a natural gas regulator station and can meet the current project schedule, which is important. But again, the town of Paris's opposition to the preferred site was somewhat related to the orderly land use and development plan conflicts, which is, again, what we're being asked about in issue 5. Specifically, concerns about the proposed site expanding the footprint into new areas of residential housing, agricultural land, and rural vistas. Because of that opposition, the town of Paris did support alternative site 2. They felt that the concerns raised about the preferred site did not exist at the alternative site 2. But it is important to note that utilizing alternative site 2 would require a shorter gen-tie line and would result in less impacts to the land. But according to the applicant, alternative site 2 would delay the in-service date of the project by approximately a year and would significantly increase the project costs. So we're kind of balancing these various concerns and claims made about the difference between the project being built on the applicant's preferred site or proposed site and alternative site 2. So the citing decision, for me, I was really focused on something that I say a lot when taking up these construction dockets, that I do have serious concerns with alternatives that negatively impact project schedules and increase project costs without a clear demonstration that those increases and delays outweigh the other benefits of the other alternatives, and trying to assign kind of a weight to those two things. Again, I do think that there are some perceived benefits of alternative site 2, but I have enough consternation about the schedule and cost implications of that site that makes me reluctant to support citing the Rice project at that location. Again, there are potential impacts on the land of the preferred site, but I do think that the applicant reasonably addressed those concerns, and that is part of what is being asked of us in issue 10F. So again, this was a really tough call for me in terms of citing. But I do think that given the potentials for delay and increased cost, that the preferred site is probably the most reasonable location for the project. But I do want to hear from my colleagues on this. And again, this is just one of those really close calls. Commissioner Nieto?
Thanks, Chair Strand. Thanks for your nuanced discussion of this topic. I came to similar analysis. I think it's a tough decision, and was open to hearing both of your discussions of it as well. To me, I came ultimately down to alternative site 2. I thought both of them were approvable under the orderly land use, but what I did find was this alternative site 2 does come at an additional cost. The customer who would be paying this cost didn't intervene or comment on that additional cost, and could have, whereas the town of Paris did intervene and many members of the public did comment on this issue. Regarding the timeline, again, this issue intersects with the interconnection capacity issue in a big way. And so I think there's a little bit of that choice to make around the ability of being able to use the surplus interconnection. And then second, I would note that this delay could have been avoided if the air permits had been applied for in tandem, as was discussed at the hearing, as a typical and available option that applicants do. And I would note as well, the applicant didn't object to this option because, as Chair Strand, you point out, it's viable and it's also reliable under the need, which is the whole point of the statutory alternatives being provided. So that's how I ultimately came to 2. Thank you.
Commissioner Hawkins?
Thanks. I am at alternative 3 as well, which is alt site 2, to get all the numbers jumbled here. I feel really strongly about this one. The proposed site will have the largest overall impact on the environment, land use, and aesthetics. The town is vehemently opposed to the proposed site, citing not only those issues, but also drainage issues as well. And they cite a desire to avoid a patchwork of development spread across their town, in a town that is already bearing the burden of a lot of electric infrastructure. And at the Alt 2 site, only WEPCO-owned properties would be impacted. I think that's really important to my decision-making, because the gen tie aspect, which touches many properties along, is eliminated with this closer property to the tie-in site. Related to the costs of Alt Site 2, but for the decisions made by the applicant, this would be the cheaper alternative, as was just being discussed. So while the town in their testimony said that they were in no position to question the estimates of those increased costs that this alt site might face, the commission is in a position to scrutinize those increased costs. And I'm going to suggest a condition in a later item to ensure that we have visibility into tracking those costs and their appropriateness. Related to risks of delay, as the town of Paris noted, it's the urgency and the accelerated timeline by the applicant that created these risks and the situation that we find ourselves in this tough choice. So in my view, we were presented with a real uneven set of alternatives. While they all can be approved and permitted, we had to compare them with sort of uneven factors. And if the applicant had the opportunity to choose the cheaper alternative that aligns with the town's preferences but chose to pursue the permitting at the proposed site instead. I don't view that as a reasonable path forward. I also view the applicant purchasing the land of Alt Site 2 as a demonstration that they are willing to use that site as they've later expressed in the record. So I think this is a great opportunity for us to show the importance of listening and participating with local bodies of government. And again, on the site, the supplemental interconnection, which will enable the speed, is not yet complete. So there's already limitations on how quickly this resource can be used and useful, and there's uncertainty with that already. So the risk of delay is uncertain overall. And one point I want to make really clear as well is that the costs of replacement capacity and energy were also cited as an increased cost, but that is not a valid point. The cost would be paid one way or another. You're either buying energy from the market and capacity from the market, or you have an asset and rate base that is being paid for, and that's likely more expensive than just getting excess capacity. So I didn't find that as a persuasive argument. And yeah, for all those reasons, I'm at Alt 3, Alt Site 2.
Thank you. This is on me because of our taking 5 and 8 together, but Commissioner Nieto mentioned that she was at Alt Site 2 in issue 8, which is Alt 3, but that in issue 5, she was, her decision in issue 8 didn't affect her decision in issue 5. Is that accurate? First of all, I want to make sure I'm
Yes.
capturing that correctly.
I'd be at Alt 1 on issue 5.
Okay, so then I want to make sure that your position on issue 5, that we can take that first of all, and that you have an opportunity to, like, if it's not the same, to discuss why not.
I'd prefer we just take Alt 8 or issue 8 first.
That's
and then,
fine.
And then I'll.
We still got to go back to 5.
Yeah, let's do it that way.
Are you okay with that?
That's
Yep.
Are you okay with that? Okay, so skipping 5, 6, and 7, in issue 8, Commissioner Nieto and Commissioner Hawkins are both at alternative 3, which is that the applicant's alternative site 2 is authorized for the construction of the project. Again, I appreciate all the information and in the record on this and the comments that you guys made about your decision-making process. I think that the points about cost increases and supplemental interconnection does help some of my concerns regarding who's paying for the cost increases and the timing of the delay. I figured Mr. Urgency would have some good insight into that one. So I can join you guys at Alt 3 on issue 8 for alternative site 2. And then let's just go back to 5 quickly so we don't forget. Because all 3, for me, my position I think was similar to Commissioner Nieto's, because all 3 were viable, and because the things that I was focusing on in issue 8 site selection weren't really about disorderly land use, I was still okay with alternative 1 there, regardless of the site selection that occurred in issue 8. But again, because of the interplay, I just want to make sure that we're talking about those things at once. So that's where I was on 5, but it's kind of moot at this point since we are where we are on 8.
And that's how I viewed it as well.
Okay.
How I got there for
Thank you.
5.
And I'm at Alt 1 on 5 as well, and appreciate it being moot.
Thank you, thank you. Good discussions. You have what you need? Okay. Issue 6 asks if the proposed project would have a material adverse impact on competition in the relevant wholesale electric service market. I didn't see anything in the record that showed that that would happen, so for this one, I'm at alternative 1.
Alt 1?
Alt 1 for me as well.
Thank you. Issue 7 asks about the proposed project, if constructed complying with Wisconsin statute section 196.491, sub 3, sub D 8, and use brownfields to the extent practicable. Here I was at alternative 1.
Alt 1?
Alt 1 for me as well. One of the sites that was proposed was a brownfield, but isn't really viable for other reasons, including cost and proximity to homes. So we were close to having 2 brownfields in the same day, but I'm at Alt 1.
Thank you. We just discussed our positions on issue 8, so we can move forward. Similar to what Commissioner Nieto also said about not being necessary to take up demand response in this docket because of its applicability to the applicant. That's also my position on having the cost overrun investigation discussion again, not necessary here. So we can move straight into issue 9 then, which is the first of our proposed conditions. Again, standard conditions, asking which ones we want to include. We had a good discussion of this in Oak Creek. So I just want to make sure that we are being consistent. My position is to be consistent here to what we did in the Oak Creek docket regarding these standard conditions. So I was at alt 2, which was again to remove condition Romanet 6, keep in Romanet 9, items 5 through 7, and add the to the extent practicable clause to the line of sight condition in Romanet 14.
And I was in the same place here as well, consistent with the previous docket and at alt 2.
Okay, thank you.
I'm at alt 2 and support all the changes that were just discussed. In addition, I have a proposed modification to 9A Romanet 8. And that is the cost reporting requirement here, that the applicant shall submit to the commission the final actual costs segregated by major accounts. I won't read that whole thing, it's there. But to the end, I would add that the applicant shall provide the incremental final project costs related to the use of alternative site 2 for the following categories. And they're the 3 categories that the applicant identified in their testimony related to the extension of warranty coverage on the engines and additional storage and handling fees. The second was procurement and transporting equipment, reperforming site-specific design work and geotechnical studies, and inflation, all one category. And 3 was owner's costs associated with land acquisition, which has already been incurred, permit modifications, inflation, and insurance costs. So I think getting that reporting will be really important for what I have to say in a future decision item. So I'm just laying that out now.
Like a dire warning. Okay. I understand why what you're after there. I think it's fine to ask for information that is related to this condition, and will help kind of flesh out costs associated with alternative siting, and claims made in the record. Commissioner Nieto, how do you feel about the proposed modification?
I agree with it, and I'll be interested to hear what we just had a teaser for coming in the future, and how, I'm guessing on the project cost. And I think it covers some, I guess, question about that incremental number and some of the inflation figures included in, helps cover that, so I support it. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have what you need for that one? Okay, great. All right, so we are moving now to 9B, which is the cost overrun condition requested by the applicant. So my position in this is the same as it was in Oak Creek, which is alternative 3, to not authorize the 10% band and to instead be consistent with the hard cap that we need to be notified of any cost overruns.
Alt 3 for me as well. Thanks.
Alt 3 for me as well.
Thank you. All right, 9C is also similar is the same as what we took up in Oak Creek regarding straight voltage. So again, I'm at alternative 2 that 9C is modified by the commission is necessary for approval of this project.
And I am in the same spot as in the previous docket as well, alt 2.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Alt 2 for me as well.
Thank you. Issue 10, we are moving on to project-specific conditions now. This is the competitive bid condition. This is posed to us slightly differently than it was in Oak Creek, but my position has not changed. So I'm supportive of including the condition related to competitive bidding. I'm comfortable with incorporating it into the standard quarterly reporting condition that's included in what we approved in 9A. And then I would again slightly modify it to add as applicable, which so it might have been included here, but I'm not sure. No, it was already included in this Romanette. So again, I'm comfortable including it, but would add the as applicable language again.
And I'm in the same spot. Alt 2, include it and modify it with your as applicable.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And I'm comfortable with that as well, Alt 2.
Thank you. Issue 10B, a cost overrun condition proposed by Cub. My position on this is similar to Oak Creek. I'm at Alt 3, not because this is not important, but because I think we have other more robust vehicles to consider these issues now that our investigation has been authorized. So for 10B, I'm at Alt 3.
Same, Alt 3.
Alt 3 for me as well.
Thank you. 10C is the in-service date delay notification condition. Again, I'm in the same position as I was in Oak Creek, which would be Alt 3, that this condition is not necessary for approval of the project.
Alt 3 as well.
Thank you.
Same spot for me.
Thank you for issue 10D. Exactly the same as Oak Creek in terms of what's being proposed. My comments there, the issues that we have potentially incorporated into our decisions regarding demand response. Again, I'm at Alt 3 on this one.
Yes. I am at Alt 3 again on this one as well. Thanks.
Alt 3 for me too.
Thank you. 10E is the list of events prescribing force majeure conditions. I am at Alt 3 on this one as well.
Alt 3.
Alt 3.
Okay, 10F is regarding an enforceable MOU between the town of Paris and the applicant. Since we had an interesting discussion on site selection and the town of Paris's role in that, I'm curious to see kind of where we are based on the, that we selected alternative site 2 and how this impacts potential relationships or agreements between the applicant and the town of Paris. So I will turn it over first to Commissioner Hawkins, who seems to have some very strong feelings on these issues, to talk about 10F for us first.
Appreciate going first for once. No. I'm at Alt 3 on this one, that I don't think it's necessary. My surprise is in the next item. So I will just say that we regularly encourage all project developers to reach agreements, with local bodies of government. And so I understand why the town was asking for this. But I feel that we can't condition approval on something like this happening in the future. It would just give the town an unreasonable amount of leverage over the applicant, which would put other utility customers at risk. So I don't support this ask for that reason. And many of my concerns, as the chair just mentioned, are already addressed by the selection of going to Alt Site 2.
Same for me. I was at Alt 3 here, particularly with the selection of Alt Site 2 addressing my concerns, and I thought this condition was a little bit wide open.
Yep. Yep.
Thanks.
I would have been at Alt 3 regardless of which site we selected, but yes, I think we're all in agreement on Alt 3 on this one. Thank you. 10G asks about wetlands and waterways, conditions proposed by DNR staff for the same reasons that I was at alternative 1 in Oak Creek. I'm at alternative 1 in this one as well.
Alt 1?
Yeah, can't wait to hear our surprise.
No, it's actually the next issue,
Oh
not
my
the
gosh.
next. Sorry, delay. But yeah, Alt 1.
Okay, thank you. 11 is uncontested, but it's my understanding that we are going to discuss this based on, I'm assuming, the selection of alternative site 2. So I will turn it over to Commissioner Hawkins to lead our discussion of this.
Thanks. Yeah, this was an uncontested one, but given my interest in our approval of the tracking of the cost overruns associated, not cost overruns, the costs associated with Alt Site 2, I want to just make sure it's clear here that we're approving the as applied for cost of the project as the hard cap and not the one that includes all of those unknown and uncertain costs related to potential delays. And I think that's really important that we get that reporting from the baseline cost that we were given and not from the higher estimate that's spelled out here in this issue 11. So I'm suggesting that the alternative is revised to say the applicant's cost estimate of the proposed project excluding AFUDC is the $279,600,000 and strike the rest of that language. That allows for that tracking and visibility for anything above that to come in. And I think that's really important. While some of those costs might be totally reasonable and prudent, I'm interested to see if all of them are, and if the decision-making that put us in this position, some of them might not be reasonable to pass along to customers. So I want to track them and take that up in a future proceeding when we would review those costs. And so I think by just keeping the cap at the original estimate, it sets us up to do that and have a very, informed discussion of those costs, if any. They're all theoretical at this point. So that's why I am proposing a modification to issue 11.
Thank you. Commissioner Nato?
I can join you there. I think for the same reasons, and what this would do is trigger that reporting at that point. And I guess one question I have about the approach you're describing is with regard to the issue you raised around the MISO market purchases and the actual difference between the incremental cost of alternative Site 2 versus the original when you take into account the cost of plant and rate base. How are you expecting to see that reconciled under the reporting?
I'm not expecting that to be reconciled. I'm expecting that to just be a normal course of business in a fuel case where those, costs are incurred if they're needed, in the interim years. But the other costs associated with the project itself would be tracked. And so in the modification we made to the 9A Romanet 8, the 3, it didn't include that just because those costs may very well be incurred and they will be, reasonable. If market purchases have to be made, they have to be made. And so I wasn't suggesting we track those and try to differentiate between a rate-based asset and a market purchase, because if they happen, they happen, and that's perfectly acceptable.
Yeah, I think that's a good approach. I'll join you. Thank you.
Can you explain one more time what it's going to do and answer if you have vetted this with staff at all?
Yes,
Staff.
I can explain that by keeping the cap at the approved project cost estimate here at the sort of the baseline proposed site dollar amount, it triggers the reporting that I'm interested in. So it's really just to enable that. Because if we didn't do that here, what I've suggested earlier won't really come into effect until we get. It would supersede it, yeah, totally. So that's it, and I have discussed it with the gentleman to your left. We sorted through all these ifs, ands, and all those sorts of things, and so, yes, definitely talked through with staff.
Okay. I'm good with the strikes in the alternative to leave it at the 279.6. Thank you. 12 asks if the commission has complied with WEPA. Do you have what you need? Sorry.
Yep.
Okay. Here I'm at alternative 1 that yes, we've complied with WEPA.
Alternative 1.
Alternative 1.
Thank you. 12B asks if the proposed project, if constructed, will have undue adverse impact on other environmental values as provided under Wisconsin statute section 196.491 sub 3 sub D 4. So there were some issues raised here regarding the town of Paris and some issues that they had, concerns about wetlands, farm fields, drainage tiles, and some other things. I did not feel that regardless of site selection, that would, there was interplay, but I didn't think that it would result in undue adverse impacts. I think that's a fairly high standard bar to clear. So I was at alternative 1 for this one, but again, we have had discussion about site selection, so interested to hear if you guys are okay with this one.
I was at alternative 1 on this one. Thank you.
And I'm at alternative 1 as well.
Great. All right, moving on to issue 13, our final issue. Should the commission grant a CPCN for the proposed project? Here I'm at alternative 2, that yes, the commission should grant a CPCN with the conditions discussed today.
Alternative 2.
Alternative 2 for me as well.
Thank you. We are ready for a motion.
Right. In docket 6630 CE 316, I move we grant a CPCN consistent with our discussion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. That concludes our official business today. Our next open meeting is scheduled for Thursday, June 12th, 2025 at 10:30 a.m. May I have a motion to adjourn?
I move we stand adjourned until Thursday, June 12th, 2025 at 10:30 a.m.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you.